For all the trust we place in it is really nothing more than a candle, all too easily snuffed out. And when it is gone, we are left alone in the dark, and everything we would scoff off at daylight suddenly becomes very believable. Alright, before I wax too melodramatic, here's my story. I was very young, only 4 or 5 at most, before either of my siblings were born. It was just Mommy and Daddy and me, living in our little house in Great Bend, Kansas. Very quaint. We were a young family, without much money, and most of our furniture was second-hand. It was the middle of the day, summer, hot and boring. I was playing marbles by myself on the thin carpet beside the huge, old, flower-patterned couch. Mom was down the hall in the kitchen, and Dad was at work. Why I was trying to roll marbles around on the carpet, I don't know. We had a perfectly good linoleum floor after all. But there I was, swishing the marbles back and forth, happily bouncing them into each other. Then, in my overzealous enthusiasm, I rolled too hard. My favourite marble, the clear, ruby red one, zipped into the dark space under the couch and was lost. Damn it, Dad wasn't home and he was the only one strong enough to move that huge old couch for me. I'd have to get my marble back myself. I reached my hand under the couch, tentatively at first, then deeper, encountering no marbles. I pulled my hand out in disappointment. Then, a hand reached out from under the couch back at me. I remember the image vividly, and I suspect I always will. It was a slim hand, with tapered fingers. A woman's hand. It was gnarled and wrinkled, as if aged, and it was dead black. Not black as in African, black as in dead. Of course, back then, I didn't know that corpses blackened as they decomposed, so I didn't know what the black meant. The hand reached out to me as far as it could, which was just up to the wrist. Then it retreated under the couch. Then it emerged again, this time pushing with it a little crumbled up plastic bag with a logo on it I didn't recognize. It waited, as if expecting me to take the bag. Then, when I didn't, it pulled the bag back under the couch and was gone. I got up, walked down to the kitchen and told my mommy what had happened. Why didn't I run screaming? Or at least run? I don't really know. All I can say is, I was a little kid. A hand reaching out from under the couch at me didn't seem like that huge a deal. I hadn't yet learned what was and was not permissibly in reality. I had no worldview. Mom was skeptical, but walked me back to the couch and explained how I was probably imagining things. She even reached a hand under the couch to convince me that nothing was down there. Later, my dad lifted the couch up for me, and the only thing under it was, of course, my missing marble, plus a few more marbles I didn't even remember losing. But here's the scary part. For years, I remembered this. I even developed a weird fantasy of little hand people living under the couch, and I, in my childlike innocence, believed that they would catch me and take me away if I ever reached into their domain again. Then, as I grew older, I wrote the memory off as a dream I'd had as a child. Cute, but silly. Then, a few years ago, I recounted the story to my mother. She gave me a funny look, and told me she remembered it, because, after all, she had been there. She told me that she remembered me coming up to her in the middle of the day and telling her about the hand under the couch, and remembered being highly disturbed by my story, since I was an extremely quiet, well-behaved kid who didn't ever lie. Then she told me about the couch itself. According to her, she and my dad had gotten the couch from the estate of an old woman who had actually died on it. This was the first time I'd heard about this, but it sure explained why they got rid of the couch within a month of my story. But here's the part that truly frightens me, even to this day. The part that I have to try so hard to get out of my mind some nights. Remember that bag the hand pushed towards me? I've never forgotten the logo that was on it. And recently, as in a few years ago, I saw the same logo again, on what looked like the same type of bag in a hardware store. It was a bag of utility razors. I always wanted a little sister. I would beg my parents, please, please, and they'd roll their eyes at me and tell me that it wasn't as simple as I thought. That didn't stop me from asking about it every chance I got though. When they brought Sarah home, it was the happiest day of my life. She was so cute, I couldn't wait to share my toys with her. I started going through them, deciding which ones were hers and which ones were mine. I borrowed my daddy's label maker and started putting our names on each thing so we wouldn't get them confused. She cried a lot at first. I'd asked my parents why she cried so much and they told me it was natural. They said when she got used to us and our house, she would calm down and not cry at all. Sometimes though, she'd cry so loud that Daddy would have to take it into the basement where it was soundproof so the neighbours wouldn't complain. She slept in Mommy and Daddy's bed for the first month. Sometimes I tried to join them, but they'd always lock their door. Mommy said their bed wasn't big enough for us all to sleep in. I was patient. I knew the new bed with the bars that they'd set up in my room would eventually be hers. When they felt it was safe to let her sleep on her own, they started putting her in it. She wasn't crying so much anymore by then. And I would lie in my bed and watch her sleep from across the room. They'd take her into the bedroom first and lay with her until she fell asleep, then move to our room. Some nights, after she was moved, I'd see her lying there with her eyes open, just staring at the ceiling. So I'd go over and give her toys through the bars. A lot of the time she'd just throw the toy and then start crying, and I'd have to hide under my covers before Daddy came in to deal with her. Eventually, they started letting Sarah sit with me in the playroom. I was told that I wasn't allowed to give her anything too small or sharp that she could hurt herself with. Oh, I was so happy. I would sit behind her and brush her hair and tell her that she was the best little sister in the world. I showed her which toys were hers and which were mine, but she didn't seem to care. Sometimes we'd sit on the window seat and she'd bang on the window while I drew on it with special crayons. School started back up at Sugar Creek Elementary, and I went, but Sarah had to stay at home. Mummy said she wasn't ready for school yet. I'd come home and tell Sarah all the stuff I learned. I drew pictures of us playing together. When I showed them to Daddy, he'd tell me to thank you and take them to keep in his office. Then came the really bad day. I'll never forget it. I came home from school and Mommy was just sitting at the table, smoking. She looked really sad. I went to play with Sarah but couldn't find her. When I went to ask Mommy where she was, she started crying. I asked her what was wrong and she said that Sarah was gone. I didn't understand totally, but I started crying too and told her we need to find her. She shook her head and said she was gone somewhere where we couldn't go. Daddy took her bed apart. He threw away all the drawings with her in them. He took my name tags off all the toys. Sometimes I'd find one he missed and it'd make me cry. I started collecting them and hiding them, but he found where I hid them one day by accident and got really mad. We weren't allowed to talk about her. It was like she never existed. I didn't think it was fair. I told Mommy that Daddy was mean to make us not talk about Sarah, but she said it was better that way, and I would understand when I was older. I saw Sarah again. It was just one time, but I'll never forget it. I was with my mummy doing some errands when we went grocery shopping, then went to the fabric store in Thornton so Mummy could look at the materials to make some new curtains out of. She remembered that she had letters to mail, so we stopped at the post office to buy some stamps. I was humming to myself and read posters while Mummy talked to the lady behind the counter. And that's when I saw Sarah. She was cute as I remembered. I walked over and looked at the poster with her picture, but they'd gotten her name wrong. Someone had written her name down as Shannon. I rushed over to Mummy and tugged on her sleeve and told her that Sarah was up on the wall with other pictures of children, but she got all flustered and apologized to the lady before dragging me out of the post office. I had to shout because she kept trying to talk over me instead of listening. "I saw Sarah! They got a picture on the wall in there!" Finally, Mommy slapped me and told me it wasn't Sarah and that it may have looked like Sarah, but I was mistaken, and if I didn't stop, I'd get in real trouble with Daddy when he got home. I cried and promised to be good. But even after I promised, I wasn't allowed to have dinner, and I had to sit in my room that night. I heard Mommy and Daddy talking in the kitchen, and they got kind of loud. Somebody started banging open the kitchen drawers, and then my daddy's feet stomped up the stairs. But I heard Mommy scream, "Don't you dare!" And he stopped outside my room and then went back downstairs. We never went back to that post office, and I never saw Sarah again. This is the first time I've talked about Sarah since that day. I know the topic of scary or rather disturbing stories from our childhoods are outdated, but I thought you might like this one. This one was from my high school years. It wasn't always rebellious. In fact, I was more of a goody two-shoes. I wasn't what you'd call an angel of a child, but I was still keeping up appearances, had good grades, was disciplined enough, and I had pretty keen manners. I hung out with this delinquent, Cody. He was a dick. I mean, a huge dick. Nobody really liked him, but he was quite wealthy, and while his parents were away, he would throw huge parties that half of the 10th grade students from my high school would go to. I was always invited to these, but he always started the parties at awkward times, at night, like midnight, 6 in the morning and stuff like that. His last party that he ever had thrown started at 3 in the morning, and my parents would immediately decline, so I didn't even bother asking. I know it wasn't of my nature, and now looking back, it was a stupid choice, but I decided I would sneak out. My dad always stayed up till 1 every night, and never emerged from his bedroom until the following afternoon, and my mom always slept till noon, using "I need beauty sleep" as an excuse. Time came. It was the night of the party. It was about 1:30ish, and my dad had already stumbled into his bedroom and was snoring at this point. I slowly twisted the handle of my door to reveal the inky blackness of the hallways. Now would be the perfect time to escape. If not now, never. He lived pretty far away. It would take at least an hour to get there by foot, and he wanted me to arrive early to help set up. I softly closed my door and lightly paced towards our sliding glass door. I opened it slowly. It must have been a minute before there was an opening big enough for me to squeeze through. Once I was through, I took no risk and took another minute to close it again. I was outside, and the moon illuminated the ground quite well. I lived in the desert area, and the risk of coyotes was high, especially for a bright full moon like this one. But I had a pocket knife to defend myself. Also, I had a means of defense, which was a spray-on antiperspirant and a lighter, which people used as a makeshift flamethrower to scare away coyotes. I climbed over the chain link fence and fell on the earth of the path that led down the side of the ditch below. I took no risk on encountering any muggers or shady people on the path. I slid down into the ditch below. The terrain was rugged and difficult to navigate. I had to dodge tall brush and jump over eroded crevices in the earth. I checked my watch. It was around 2:15 and I knew I must be close, because I saw a familiar house that I always passed by while walking on the sidewalk to get to Cody's house. Only a couple more blocks and I would have made it. The terrain had gotten surprisingly less jagged and smoother after a couple of minutes, and besides the empty beer bottles and cardboard boxes that littered the ground, something else caught my eye. There was a brown, torn up tarp that had a large, and when I say large I mean it, a large lump in the middle. I stopped for a moment and observed it, before my curiosity managed to claw its way through, and I slowly approached it. I touched it, softly. Just then, something enormous burst out in a low-pitched, wild scream of fright. I was knocked back on my ass, and I was frozen in fear, and I noticed a tall figure emerge from the dirt. It was a bear-like creature that wore a dark brown trench coat and light brown pants that seemed to resemble sweatpants. He had loafers on. They seemed like size 29. I know I'm exaggerating, but it was honestly inhuman. The bear-like creature stood up. He was tall. He must have been like 7 feet, and that even might be an understatement. Long white hair protruded from every visible inch of his body, almost like an animal. Its glossy eyes met with mine, and I was ready to run. I managed to stutter out a few words. What? I stopped, examining the creature once more. What are you? The creature looked at me again and let out a loud, hearty chuckle. He wiped a few tears of joy from under his eyes and gave me a smile.
Why, my boy, I am Mr. Trenchfoot,
he said, still grinning at me. His tone was nothing short of friendly, and that was the only thing stopping me from making a mad dash back to my house. He gave me a puzzled look and asked,
do you by any chance know the date?
I thought he was joking at first, and I laughed a bit. Then I saw his serious expression. I stuttered again, but managed to collect myself. It's June 7th, I said. He looked shocked, or rather intrigued. He looked at me again, and my eyes met his once more.
My, I have been asleep quite long. It was November last time I was awake,
he said, still sounding jovial.
Now tell me, what have I missed?
We engaged into a conversation, and it lasted a good 15 minutes. We spoke about politics, the news on celebrities and stuff like that. I told him about school and how I was a part of the track team. We spoke for a while. I looked down my watch and noticed the time. I had about 16 minutes to get there and help him set up. I sat up from the rock on which I previously rested. I have to get going, I said. Mr. Trenchfoot stood up and wiped dirt from his coat and coughed before speaking. He walked towards a pipe, or rather a flood drain.
Follow me,
he said, entering it.
I need to show you something.
He crawled farther into the pipe, and soon he was enveloped in darkness. I dared not enter and stood there for a while. He turned, and The only reason I knew that is because the little bit of moonlight illuminated his eyes, just as it would a dog's or a cat's. I stepped back a bit, a little frightened, and reminded him I had to go.
"Come here,"
he said softly. He repeated, with each time he got more angered and menacing.
"Come here. Come here. Come here!"
He inched forward, just enough so I could see him fully. Long, black claws protruded from his fingers. He clawed the sides as he repeated,
"Come here now! Come here! Now!"
I ran, as fast as I could up the slope, not daring to look back at him. However, I did manage to look back once. He was standing there, too far to catch me at this point, staring at me, with his glossy eyes. I ran so fast and climbed over my fence, this time not cautious of not making any noise, and I ran inside, shaken up and frightened. My dad heard my heavy breathing and must have thought I was having a panic attack, which I was. He rushed to my aid. I explained something had tried to attack me, and he called the police without hesitation. I explained to the police where it had happened and who I saw. They took no time to rush to the area and scan it. No tarp of Mr. Trenchcoat in sight. I was there, my mum and dad holding me at a safe distance. I pointed towards the pipe which he tried to lure me in, and the chief motioned several armed men in. They didn't find him, however, and they still haven't to this day. Oh, that's my story. Creepy, right? Yeah, well, things have been the same. Well, I got grounded for a couple of weeks, but they let me off because they were glad I was safe. So I guess you could say this had been a happy ending. I guess for me at least. I still haven't told you the best part. You know how I said they didn't find him? Well, they did kick open a grate and entered a concrete room, no bigger than a walk-in closet. Again, they didn't find Mr. Trenchfoot in there. However, they did find something. They found Mr. Trenchfoot's tarp in there, still dusty as ever. In the corner of the room was a pile of bloody, torn clothes, not much bigger than the clothes that I had been wearing. I don't know what to do anymore. I'm so scared. I can't trust anyone. I went camping about 3 weekends ago in the Huntsville Nation Forest in Texas. Me and 3 friends that came home for the weekend. They were all in college, and usually we all get together at least once a year, old friends from high school. For the camping trip, we planned to go backpacking deep in the forest, live off of fish that we catch and animals that we can trap. We've been doing this for a while in Texas and in numerous places, Arizona, Colorado, if anyone is familiar with the Spanish Peaks there, New Mexico, so we're pretty much used to anything you'd encounter out there. It was my turn to pick where we went camping, so I chose Huntsville. More accurately, it's Huntsville, New Waverly. So we drove up there, park our car in the camping park spot, and start walking off into the forest. We had some laughs along the way, everyone catching up with each other's lives. We walked until it started to get dark and set up camp where we stopped. Everyone gathered wood to make a fire, and we set our tent up. And we do what we always do, try and scare each other with weird stories. Around this time, we started to smell something very faint. It was noticeable, but not overbearing. We couldn't put our finger on what it was, so we just carried on. Mike had to pee, and he walked off in the forest. A second later, he come running back, pee all down his jeans like he missed really bad. Immediately we all crack up and throw some jokes at him. Then we noticed he was white as snow and trying to catch his breath. He starts screaming for us to follow him and runs off. We all get serious and go follow him, not knowing what the problem was. We start to hear a faint scream and crying in the distance in the direction we were running. It was pitch black away from the camp, and Mike had the only flashlight. We left ours at the camp. He had his from his trip taken away. So, at this stage, we didn't have much choice but to follow the light, which was frantically pointing here and there in front of him. The screams gets closer and Mike starts to slow down. We then noticed a ratty old cabin that looked like it was abandoned, except for a faint light we could see from one of the old mildew-covered windows. The crying was intense. Whoever it was couldn't breathe enough to let out a full yell. We all followed Mike up to the front door, and we could all hear the crying from inside. As soon as he knocked on the door, it stopped. We all waited and heard really heavy footsteps walking fast to the door. There was a giant slam against the door and the sound of a bolt unlocking. Then, nothing. We waited for a bit, knocked a few more times, but still, nothing happened. We walked around the house. There was no way any of us were leaving each other's side, and noticed a window, which was a good way up. Alex took a deep breath and asked us to give him a boost so he could see inside. Me and Mike lifted him up to the window. We watched him brush away dirt and webs from the window and place his face close to the window to try see something. There was a quick beat. Then, suddenly he breathed in fast and let out a loud scream. He fell back from the window, screaming bloody murder the whole way. We all tried to calm him down, but he was hysterical. We went to him, but he started to shake, punch, kick, you name it. He then took off towards the camp. None of us wanted to be separated, so we all ran close behind him. We caught up to him and grabbed him and set him down. The fire was dying out, so I grabbed some nearby wood that we collected and added it to the fire. My hands were shaking, and I had to do something. I went back to Alex and we all tried to calm him down. He wouldn't. He kept screaming and was breathing so hard that he eventually fainted. All of us are terrified now, and we all kept the fire high until sunrise. Periodically, Alex kept waking up, screaming just like before. By sunrise, he was up and looked catatonic, just mumbling to himself and whimpering. Me and Mike decided to go look at the cabin now it was daylight. We searched where we thought it was, except there was nothing there. Nothing at all. The indistinct smell from last night had now grown into a very strong smell of something dead, something stale. We headed back to the camping site. When we got there, we found Alex had chewed into the side of his face and swallowed so much blood that he was throwing up. John was at his back, and he looked like he was about to die from exhaustion. I guess we all looked that way. I just didn't notice until I saw his face. Alex said quietly that we need to leave. Now. We all started to pack up the tent. It started to rain really heavily. It was about noon, and the sky started to grow really dark. Alex started to go into a panic. He went and grabbed a big stick and yelled at us to leave it and leave now, or he'd knock us out and drag us out there himself. Mike started to yell at him, and they started to fight. We broke it up and finished packing, and then started to make our way back. After a little while, we arrived at a creek we had crossed the previous day. only it was flooded over, and the water was moving too fast for us to cross it. Alex started to scream again, yelling at Mike for taking his time packing up the tent when we could have gotten out of here. This went on for a little while, until we finally convinced Alex to calm down and tell us what happened. He said, as soon as he put his face to the glass, a face on the other side did the same thing, and started to smile really big. It had dark eyes and a mouth which was much bigger than Alex's. As the smile got as large as it could, a giant shadow behind it swung something down and sliced its face off. The face was stuck to the window, and he said it started to laugh quietly as it slid down. Mike, still annoyed, and though he wouldn't admit it, began to freak out, started to argue with him again. We eventually started to follow the creek for a way to cross. We then started to see toys floating in the creek. Really old toys, old Barbie dolls and baby dolls. This wasn't like any old trash floating in the creek though. This was a lot of Barbie dolls, a lot of baby dolls. One washed towards the side and Mike picked it up. It had some kind of voice chip that was dying and started to say some gurgling words we couldn't understand, followed by its sad excuse for laughter. Then it sounded like it was whispering. We thought the batteries must be dying. He threw it down. We kept going, and the sun was starting to set. Alex was freaking out more now, and was whimpering and breathing heavily. We all started to see shadows moving behind trees, something we all called BS on, until we were all seeing it. It was barely light out, and we stopped as we see the cabin right in front of us. None of us knew what to think. Mike said, "This is bull, I'm going in there." Alex tried to stop him. We all do. All of us just wanted to go home. Mike tells us all to get lost, to do our own thing, that he doesn't care anymore and this is all bull. We start to hear hundreds of the same sort of Barbie dolls as before, laughing, whispering and trying to sing. We started to move forward past the cabin, all of us, and kept pushing forward. We smelled something dead in the air, something stale, the same something as before. We started to hear something crying and something screaming. We kept on going. We eventually crossed the creek and left the woods. We get back to our vehicle and got in. It's pitch black and we drive. We are about to get on the 45 to Houston, but the road is under construction and can't be accessed. It points to a detour. As we head towards the detour, it seems to be small, bumpy dirt road going into the woods. We then see a young girl come up to us. She looks like she was in trouble, young and pretty. She approaches the passenger side door and she looks like she's really drugged up or beaten. Alex doesn't roll down the windows, nor does he open the door. She reaches for the handle and he immediately locks it. She then puts her face on the window and starts to smile really big. We floor it. Alex starts to cry and scream, and we're all breathing heavy. We finally cut on the street that takes us to the 45, and we take it the whole way. When we get back to my apartment, everyone doesn't know what to say, and we all break apart and go our separate ways. Mike messages me later and says he's going back. I try and convince him not to, and all he does is say it was our minds and that we were screwing with him. I think he just went to prove himself that he wasn't scared. I can smell that stench everywhere now. I don't go out anymore. I just stay in and don't answer the door. Last week, everyone I met was acting really strange. People that I knew for a long time and total strangers. My own dad. When I went to his place to eat supper with him, he just watched me, strangely, when I was sitting down. He didn't say a word the whole time. I kept asking him, "What's wrong?" He just slowly shook his head. When I was leaving to go home, I turned to wave. He had black eyes and an open mouth, like he was in pain. When I started to walk back, he shut the door and bolted it. I stayed there, knocking and knocking. Nothing. I called him. His phone was disconnected. I even called the police. Halfway through the questions they were asking me, the connection started to fade into static. I could hear a faint mumbling, singing and laughing. Mike had completely vanished. There was not even a record of him being alive. When I called Alex's house, they talk to me like I'm some salesman. They say they don't know Alex and to stop calling. The person who tells me that is Alex's mother. I can't get a hold of John. Someone knocked on my door, and when I went to look, I saw a face completely covering the peephole, and a giant smile started to form. I called the cops again, but instead of turning into static, they got really strange. "Sir, are you affected by any drugs at the moment?" "No." "Are you coming home anytime soon?" "Excuse me?" "Come home." And the phone call ended. My mail slot is swinging open every now and then. Someone is sliding pieces of baby dolls through it. I tried to call people now, and all I hear is static and bad baby doll noises, and this crying and screaming. My TV is busted, but when I go to pee, I can hear it on. I might be going insane. Whoever lives above me started to scream in pain and crying deeply recently. I hear giant footsteps from their apartment. I hear bangs and something falling to the ground. From the neighbours to my right of my apartment, I hear what sounds like a baby that never gets tended to, and then it sounds like a baby doll whose batteries are dying. My phone has been ringing now, and it's Alex telling me things in a language that I've never heard before, nor could even manage to repeat. I kept getting emails of pictures of black and small colorations. Now, I can't even access my email. Someone knocks on the door, then they slam against it. I hear the bolts unlocking one by one, and I run to make sure to lock all of them back and sit down crying. What do I do? My electricity keeps dimming. My water, sinks, bath, shower, all smell like something dead. I keep seeing a shadow of someone behind me raising something up in the air. And I just take off to the other side of the apartment with my head against the wall. I have boarded my windows shut. Someone was throwing rocks through them. I never could see who. I've boarded my bedroom in. I hear crying and screaming in there now. And right now, while I'm recording this, I can see the reflection off the computer screen of some shadow behind me. The picture you're staring at was taken sometime in the 70s. It's the only remaining image I have left of my son, and the artificial being known as Antaran, whom we adopted into our family at the time. It was a warm summer back in the mid-70s. I was driving home from my logging company after a long shift, when I had to make a stop at the local garbage tip to drop off some of the old desks my mother had given us. Something caught the corner of my eye as I bent down, and, upon closer inspection, was shocked to see what I originally thought was a doll. A plastic, outer shell with metal limbs, and more shockingly, a humanoid face, with cold, dark eyes. I'll be honest to say, I was curious at the time and incredibly impressed with the workmanship. so I didn't think twice before placing it carefully along the back seat of my car and took it home. My son's interest was almost as intense as mine, and we bonded over the course of a few days, opening it up, looking at its circuitry and seeing if anything had been misplaced or broken. Eventually, to our surprise, the being, or android, seemed to come to life. Its eyes displayed a somewhat sentient tint to them. Its limbs turned, its hands gripped, and after a few moments, it managed to stand on its own accord. Needless to say, we were scared, yet fascinated. Who could have created such a wonderful and remarkable piece of work, I thought to myself. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I realized this wasn't a toy or a doll. It showed incredible signs of intelligence and thinking ability. It learned to do everyday things, such as taking the trash out, playing with my son's toys. He even had a favorite, a small red car he'd drive alongside the kitchen counters. It learned to mimic our ways, trying to eat from a fork, despite having no digestive system, moving its mouth despite lacking the ability to speak. I knew this was something else. Perhaps a military piece of hardware, or a private project? I knew I should have handed him in, but when I watched my boy play with it so happily, his face lit up. I couldn't do it. He was always so lonely. This was one of his only friends. What kind of father would I be to deny him the right of happiness? It couldn't hurt to allow him to keep it for a while. We named him Antran, which was the print in capitals written in a small font across his back. A few months passed quickly, and family life seemed to be improving. He was one of us. My lad's grades improved, his mood improved, everything was getting better. Until one evening in July. I was sitting in my armchair with a beer watching television. My boy and Antran had knelt down on the rug, play fighting with one another as boys do, when suddenly my attention was drawn to a loud gasp. I looked down and saw my child gripping his arm. "What's wrong, Adam?" I asked. He rolled up his sleeve, and on his arm was a large red mark covering his forearm. "Antran pinched me," he replied in a snarky tone. The mark was indeed red. It would soon bruise into a swollen purple lump. My fatherly instincts took over me and, like a parent telling off a naughty child, I shouted at the android. Its cold, metallic face, for a moment, seemed to show genuine sadness and sorrow, as though it didn't know its own strength, as though it was sorry. Its lips moved. Whether it was trying to muster up the words to apologize through language or merely copying what I was doing, we will never know. Later on in the evening, I apologized for the shouting, told it everything was okay, and thought nothing of it. A few weeks later, my child came into my room. It must have been early morning. My slumber was interrupted by the gentle creaking of my bedroom door. "Dad?" he whispered. "Yes, son," I replied. "It keeps looking at me." What does?" I asked him through tired eyes. "Antran, he keeps looking at me at the end of my bed." His voice trembled fearfully. I could tell something wasn't right. I noticed him rubbing his other arm and immediately called him over. Pulling up his sleeve, my heart sank. More bruises. Must have been 4, 5, all the way up his arms. "Take off your shirt, Adam," I asked, trying to keep calm. I could feel a cocktail of emotions rising within me. Panic, fear, anger. He took off his shirt. As the waist pulled over his small head, my heart sunk further, and my eyes welled up. Before me, my son stood, his small frame coated in bruises, different sizes, different shades of browns and purples. Immediately, I got up and stormed to Adam's room. Nothing. I shouted at the top of my lungs for the being, looking under the bed, out the closed bedroom window. Nothing. Suddenly, a loud knock from above us. Then, hard footsteps. "It's in the loft," I whispered, my eyes to the heavens. As I paced down the corridor, I noticed the walls on either side were coated in scratches, all the way up to the now swinging piece of string that leads to the small loft door. Slowly, I pulled it open, telling my scared son to stay where he was. The ladder fell down and I climbed up. Taking a hold of the torch we left on the side of the opening, I turned it on, only to find the small window we have in there to be smashed. It had escaped. Immediately, I considered calling the emergency services. But who's gonna believe me? A sentient metallic being hurting my child? They'll have one look at the bruises and they'd have locked me up for abuse. I had no choice but to keep quiet. Weeks, then months passed. Every time we went outside, we noticed ever-increasing signs of Aunt Ren's presence. The familiar scratch marks alongside the bricking of my home. Plants had been disturbed, patches of mud leading up to the window. I feared for my son, taking him to school and from school, never letting him out of my sight. What had caused this sudden hostility towards us? Had we done it wrong? Was it my shouting? I found myself speaking out loud in the events, apologizing to the walls, to an empty room in the hopes Aunt Ren would hear, hoping he would stop the taunting, the endless stalking of my home. But my attempts were in vain. If I had known what would come, I wouldn't have slept that night. My sleep was once again disturbed, though this time by a blood-curdling scream. My eyes darted open, and immediately, almost natural instinct, I rushed to my son's room. It was too late. The room had been turned upside down. Everything was on the floor, the bedsheets ripped, and his window smashed. I burst into tears, screaming at the top of my lungs for my son back. I called the police, telling them my son had been kidnapped. They asked if I had seen the culprit. I lied and said I hadn't, hoping the images of my son would be enough. Like they'd believe that this doll was sentient, harmful. For the next few days, I cried myself to sleep, sobbing like a child. Life wasn't worth living anymore. I wish I'd never found that thing. I betrayed my son's trust in me as a father, to protect him, and now I pay the price. It was a September dawn, sat in my armchair drinking, when I heard the pantry door creak open. "Adam? Adam?" I called, rushing to the kitchen. Again, nothing. Except there, on the counter, was Aunt Ren's favourite red toy car. Back in the 1990s, a girl committed suicide after viewing an image posted in an old news group. The image was of a figure, which some identified as a woman, standing in the middle of a lonely road. The figure is transparent to the point that its legs are barely visible and is illuminated by an unknown light source coming from the direction of the camera. Whether it's headlights, a handheld flashlight, or the screen of the camera itself isn't known for sure, as the actual source of the image has never been found. No facial features can be made out, but the figure is most easily identified by its long, bony appendages which partly resemble a spider's leg. Those who have seen the image or know of its existence have come to know the figure as the Wanderer. The first known Wanderer account occurred in 1996. Jane, a college girl who was visiting her family during the holiday season, had an interest in the paranormal. She saw the Wanderer image on a news group, along with a message reading, "Do you see me? I can see you too." Dozens of other users saw the same post. Most didn't think much of it, just that it was somehow funny. Some actually complained that they experienced headaches while they looked at the image, and similar claims have been made by others since. According to Jane's family, she suffered from nightmares in the night after seeing the image. She claimed she would wake up and see the Wanderer outside her window. Sometimes it would scrape the glass with its spider-like limbs, but usually it would just stand there and stare at her. She would find herself unable to move while in its presence, as if many unseen hands were holding her down. Even if she closed her eyes, she would still see it. Her family was sure she had just been frightened by an online image and was having nightmares as a result, until Jane complained of seeing the Wanderer in her waking life as well. She was convinced it was following her. She would see it even while she was in a room full of people or out in public. Even though no one else saw anything, Jane's family feared for her sanity, but only assured her that the Wanderer wasn't real. Jane, however, only got worse. She began going to extreme lengths to stay awake at night. It started out with caffeine and staying active, but quickly graduated to cutting herself and screaming through the night. Before long, she wasn't sleeping at all. She was convinced that, if she slept again, the Wanderer would take her. Her family knew they couldn't just wait and hope for the best. Jane needed help. But when Jane's mother knocked on her daughter's bedroom door, she received no answer. She carefully opened the door, not wanting to disturb or startle Jane, but she still heard nothing. Jane wasn't in her bed. She wasn't sitting at a computer. She didn't appear to be in a room at all, until her mom checked the closet. There, Jane was found, curled in the corner, blood reddened from her body, having drained from the long slit across her throat. She was clutching a blood-stained note which read, "It can't have me now." Jane's case is not isolated. Through the rest of the 90s, dozens of others went missing or committed suicide after viewing the image of the Wanderer. Since the turn of the century, despite my best efforts at locating the image, it seems to have disappeared. Recently though, I posted on a news group asking if anyone had heard of the Wanderer. I've done this many times before, and usually there's one or two people who have heard the story, but no one has seen the image. This time was different. Shortly after posting, I received an email in my inbox. The subject of the email was, "I can see you." On the body only read, "Do you see me? I can see you too." There was an image attached with the message. I can't verify whether it's the real Wanderer image or not, but I must warn you that if you choose to view the image, you do so at your own risk. I must have been 6 or 7 when I lived in Lebanon. The country was ravaged by war at the time, and murders were common and frequent. I remember during a particular vicious era when the bombings rarely stopped, I would stay at home sitting in front of my television watching a very strange show. It was a kids' show that lasted about 30 minutes and contained strange and sinister images. To this day, I believed it was a thinly veiled attempt on the part of the media to use scare tactics to keep kids in place. Because the moral of every episode revolved around very uptight ideologies. Stuff like, bad kids stay up late, bad kids have their hands under the covers when they sleep, and bad kids steal food from the fridge at night. It was very weird, and in Arabic to top it off. I didn't understand much of it, but for the most part, the images were very graphic and comprehensive. The thing that stuck with me the most, however, was the closing scene. It remained much the same in every episode. The camera would zoom in on an old, rusted closed door. As it got closer to the door, strange and sometimes even agonizing screams would become more audible. It was extremely frightening, especially for a children's program. Then, a text would appear on the screen in Arabic reading, "That's where bad kids go." Eventually, both the image and the sound would fade out, and that would be the end of the episode. About 15 or 16 years later, I became a journalistic photographer. That show had been in my mind all my life, popping up in my thoughts sporadically. Eventually, I'd had enough and decided to do some research. I finally managed to uncover the location of the studio where much of that channel's programming had been recorded. Upon further research and eventually travelling on site, I found out it was now desolate and had been abandoned after the big war ended. I entered the building with my camera. It was burnt from the inside. Either a fire had broken out or someone had wanted to incinerate all of the wooden furniture. After a few hours of cautiously making my way into the studio and snapping pictures, I found an isolated, out-of-the-way room. After having to break through a few old locks and managing to break a heavy door open, I remained frozen in the doorway for several long minutes. Traces of blood, feces, and tiny bone fragments lay scattered across the floor. It was a small room and an extremely morbid scene. What truly frightened me, though, what made me turn away and never want to come back, was the bolted, caged microphone hanging from the roof in the middle of the room. There have been rumours circling about the network for some time now, but I believe that I'm the first to properly investigate them. I'm certainly the first to share my findings. I'm not going to shove this stuff down your throat and blow it out of proportion, nor am I going to tell you everything that I saw. I shall not respond to any messages regarding the matter, but I will leave instructions to those of you who are motivated enough to replicate my trip. I don't know if you've ever been to North Wales. Lots of mountains and valleys and very few large towns. Mostly rural communities out there. I visited a friend up in Bangor a few times, so I knew the way to the coast. From there, it was a matter of heading south into the foothills of Mount Snowdon. It took a while to find the old research building. It's been abandoned for years, and so the address wasn't on my sat-nav, but a couple of locals out on a hike pointed me in the right direction. If you plan on heading out there, I'd advise asking around. It's easy to get lost out in those country roads. Sure enough, there was the sign that I'd read about. The original words, Gwyneth Climate Research Centre, just visible through the fading cloak of black paint which had been sprayed across the sign. In their place had simply been daubed End. Passing this charming exterior, I turned up a narrow path where the hedges grew tall and tangled with weeds. I'm not talking narrow like, oh, it's going to be awkward if I meet another vehicle coming the other way. I'm talking grit your teeth the entire way because you can hear the brushes scraping the sides of your ears narrow. The road surface turned to gravel and then angled up sharply. My tires span, the innards creaked painfully, and it quickly became apparent that it wasn't going to make it up. I reversed down the short distance that I'd managed and parked, shrugging on my laptop bag and pocketing my dad's maglite. It was a fairly grey morning, and I had no idea what state the building's lighting would be in. Buttoning my jacket, I headed up the hill. The front door was not locked, but I set out to check the perimeter. It was pretty much as described in the original online post. Windows boarded, no visible telephone or power lines feeding into the building, and the exterior shell which was covered mostly entirely with graffiti tags. No vehicles were in sight, and the CCTV cameras just hung limp and dead in their cages. Good enough for me. The interior was dark, as I had anticipated. I flicked on the maglite and let it play over grimy walls and a dusty floor. Odd that it should seem so undisturbed. One would think that it would be a squatter's heaven, or at the very least littered with used needles and condom wrappers, as most other abandoned buildings tend to be. The graffiti was still present, but it seemed more hesitant. It was spaced out and faltered the further down the hallway I went. It finally petered out a few feet from the reception desk. The local teenagers had obviously lost their nerve. I found the fuse box behind the desk and flipped a few of the switches experimentally. Nothing happened. Whether the fuses are all blown or there was no power at all, I did not know, but I definitely did not have the capacity to fix it. The email that I had received on the matter specifically stated not to worry about the electricity supply, but, and called me a coward if you like, given a choice between functioning lights and creeping around a dark, isolated building on my own, I'd rather the former. After climbing the bare stairwell to the next floor, I was able to stow my light. The windows here were not boarded up, and great cones of sunlight had crept through the empty frames. The only creepy thing about this place was how tidy it was. Yeah, a thick layer of dust coated everything, and what few furnishings were left had been piled up in the corners of the room, but there was literally no sign of human disturbance. The sort of place an urban explorer would kill to stumble across, no doubt. I actually felt almost unwelcome there. The closest example I can think of is when you walked into class really late back in school. Everyone turns to look at you and you feel weirdly unwelcome. Yeah, well, I was getting that same feeling in my stomach when I found the room. It was pretty much as the email described, a big, open plan office layout with marks in the floor and ceiling where the cubicles had once been, and a great wreath of office chairs tangled together in one corner. There was only one desk in the room, pushed against the far wall. As I approached it, I noted that, unlike the rest of the building, it was completely devoid of dust. I pulled the laptop out my bag and set it down. It was a cheap piece of crap 2000 model which I bought online for about £30, reformatted and installed only the basic functions onto. It was specifically for that exertion. I was not going to gamble my personal machine on an interesting story I'd read on the internet. Once booted up, I produced the network cable. It was an old grey one, the kind you attribute with screechy dial-up tones, and parents complaining about your hogging the phone lines. One end slotted into the back of the machine, and I looped the other behind the desk, crouched beneath it, and felt my way along the flaky plaster until my hand brushed the port. My probing fingers discovered a cable already attached, which I unhooked and replaced with my own. When I stood up, I noticed that the cable that I held in my hand was torn, as though the other half had been yanked away so abruptly that the plastic had ruptured and the wires inside snapped. I still have it around my office somewhere actually. Nothing happened. No icons popped up announcing that I had successfully connected to the network, and the little signal strength symbol in the bottom right of the screen insisted that I was not online. Puzzled, I checked the printout of the email. No mention of this. Perhaps the power being off was an issue, contrary to the given directions. I called up the command window and tried sending a ping. A ping, by the way, is the kind of echoed message that the computer can send out to test the connection. It bounces back or receives a response from other machines and servers in the same network as you. To my surprise, I received 2 or 3 automated responses. I was online alright. The next given step was the internet. My homepage was set to Google, but strangely, the program spent a good few minutes just on a blank white screen before I was redirected to a different search engine. It was similar to Google in its minimalism, empty background with a central text bar, but the address was www.patriotsearch.com. In place of the Google text logo, there was a simple sketch-style picture of a stoic-faced soldier holding a British flag in one hand, a US in the other. The word Semper Fidelis was scratched into his helmet. I tried YouTube, but the page briefly far forward before redirecting me to Patriot Search website once more. My mouth felt dry as I clicked the search option and headed to the BBC News website. This, it seemed, was still online. As I skimmed the news headlines, any doubts that I had quickly vanished. Second American Civil War grows in size and intensity. US troops redeployed from Afghanistan, Egypt and Turkey to defend home soil. France and Spain left reeling after terrorists detonate a thermonuclear device on their borders. Police in Texas circulate CCTV images of men believed responsible for the kidnap and murder of over 50 women since 2008. Handgun bans set to become law across America after last week's White House shooting spree. The US and Britain to allow Australia and Canada to join the Patriot Alliance. UK terrorists continue to murder in border towns, demand Scottish independence. German theoretical physicists arrested by US agents, accused of treason. Research on alternate universes and interdimensional travel amongst confiscated items. I sat back, fumbled a cigarette in my mouth and lit it. I had no idea precisely what it was I just stumbled across. I still don't know, but it was huge. Some kind of alternate reality? News from the future? It seems too big to be a trick. Anyway, as the email had told me, this network, this other internet, was an overlap between our world and another one. I went back to the Patriot Search website. I began punching in anything that came to mind. Olympics, Facebook, human rights acts, police powers, current world map. Slowly, surely, a picture began to form. A picture of the world beyond my laptop, and the little umbilical cord which was the cable. I was a blind man, feeling his way through a cave, bit by bit. The more I read, the more fearful I became. A lot of bad stuff had happened. I have neither the time nor patience to list everything here. You can't expect me to describe an entire separate historical timeline, but I'll leave you with a few examples. Police in the United States and the UK were gradually being phased out, and the army was taking their place. From what I gathered, the only crimes that were properly investigated were treason and fraud, leaving all kinds of depraved killers and perverts free to do as they pleased. Some had even gained a fan followings. I stumbled across one website dedicated to someone called the dockyard butcher. I had an image and a video gallery in the sidebar, and the things I saw made me feel queasy. The world was overcrowded, but not like ours. I make no exaggeration. London was ringed by shantytown slums, the sort of place you wouldn't expect to find outside a third world country. There was so much to take in that I'm probably forgetting half of it as I type. Oh, and something had happened to New York City. There were plenty of records about it dating back to the late 90s, but then they just stopped, like it never existed. I couldn't find it on any of the maps, no discussion on any public forums about it either. I'm not sure if it's an isolated example or one of many places to officially stop existing. But if anyone decides to look for themselves, then it's something interesting to investigate. I really recommend that you don't though. A shrill bleep startled me. I left the command drive open after testing my connection. It was notifying me of an echoed ping. I reopened the window and, sure enough, I had been pinged moments later. A second ping popped up on the feed. A different source, though the IP was listed beside the notification. As far as we know, that building is the only one with a connection to the network, meaning that they hadn't come from this side. As I tried to grasp what was happening, a third ping appeared. Something clicked inside my head, and I felt my stomach turn. I had grasped blindly into the unknown, and now the unknown was grasping back. People from this other world had felt my clumsy investigations and were, in turn, investigating us. That was when my laptop went crazy. The mouse stopped responding to my usage. In fact, the pointer disappeared completely from the screen. The internet browser instantly froze up, and then forwarded me to another website, a blank white screen which loaded almost instantaneously. A file began to load itself onto the machine, its icon a pale, pupil-devoid eyeball, and its name a blank space. Though I wasn't hugely worried about the well-being of the laptop, the idea that something from this other place was pushing its way into my reality was strangely horrifying. I leapt to my feet, and just as the download reached the 75% mark, I yanked free the cable from the wall. A squeal of static emerged from the computer speakers, and the download bar quivered, frozen on screen. I dropped my cigarette in the rush, so I sat back, lit another one, and stared at that socket on the wall, scratched and slightly deformed due to my rather rough exit from the world that lay beyond it. I have no idea what that iProgram was for, and I didn't try to find out. I took the laptop apart there and then carefully grounded each piece below my heel. All that's left of its inner workings is a scattering of green plastic shards and bent metal. As for what the future holds for the old climate research building, I have no clue. Gwyneth Council have been talking about demolishing it down for years, and perhaps one day they'll pull their fingers out and get around to it. I'll be honest, when it's nothing but rubble and ashes, I won't be mourning its loss. Until that time, the socket, a little window into the unknown, is still there. If you desperately want to investigate, I can't stop you. Still, it's plain to see that whatever world the network represents is a cruel and malicious shadow of our own. Just a word of warning to any other would-be pioneers, however. If they try to make contact, ignore them. And if they try to get through, deny them. Scientists believe that, should alternate universes exist, then it would be almost impossible to knowingly transfer physical objects from one to the other. Then again, though data is simply electrical impulses, energy, that such a force should be exchangeable between two realities simply paves way for other, far less desirable visitors. I believe that whatever possibilities the network holds for us are outweighed by the risk, because what lies across the veil is not some monster or demon, but a humanity turned cold and hateful. I know how we think, and it knows we'll come back. If all hasn't dissuaded you from exploring, then please be careful. And don't let them in. He sat at his computer, tongue licking his upper and lower lips in anticipation. A long-nailed, fat and grimy index finger clicked on the mouse at a dizzying pace. An observer might have thought there was an insane miniature tap dancer somewhere underneath the piles of filth that surrounded the man. However, no tap dancer could effectively practice their talent in this cramped and deplorable dwelling. The apartment smelled old. Old food, old clothes, old sweat and old urine. Older keepsakes from a time when Meek was a different man than the behemoth sitting behind the computer now, peeking through the places where the trash didn't take over. A narrow path wound its way around the dwelling, taking Meek to the vital places he needed to go when life interrupted. A path to the bathroom that was rarely used anymore, and another that forked 30 degrees to the apartment entrance. Others led into the kitchen and what might have once resembled a dining room. Another path ended abruptly in front of the bedroom's entrance, a ramp of filth almost reaching the smoke alarm above the doorframe. The high amount of detritus that formed those paths were momentums, showing the sloth of the recent past, an involuntary story from the ground up. Most of the bottoms of them were newspapers he used back when caring seemed to still be a second nature, to soak up the vomit and spilled beer. After the insulating layers of refuse began to accumulate, above them, however, the carpet became passé to his thoughts. An empty and flattened tampon box, whose corner jutted out from one of the disgusting hillocks near his computer, caught the corner of his eye. His wife, Marie, had left him about a year or more ago, but he barely remembered what she looked like. Even the dust and grime-covered picture lying face up near the monitor offered a view of the woman he didn't really remember knowing. She took their infant daughter, Krista, with her, as it became clear that Meek was quite incapable of anything besides playing his online games. He suddenly kicked the small mound of pizza boxes under his desk in frustration as his main game character fell to his demise off a ravine and into the pixelated lava below. The group he was running this dungeon with would undoubtedly boot him out of the group for his failure to keep up. He kicked the mound again, his long, yellow, big toenail piercing a hole through the box and into what he perceived to be the wall beyond. The pain barely registered at first due to Meek seeing that his internet connection had been terminated. He stomped his other foot into the moist and brown-coloured spot on the floor to his left. A pungent smell that he had all but become immune to ran through his nostrils. He glanced at his fractured toenail, now resembling the misshapen tip of a blooded spear. He grabbed the foot in pain and cursed the monitor before him, his game character, a skeleton at the bottom of the molten orange doom. He worked hard to get his game character to this point. Now this. Did he cut into the coaxial cable that supplied his internet access with his toenail? Did he kick something else? God damn it all! He shouted to the screen before him, a middle finger echoing what the mountains of garbage near him wouldn't let his voice do. He quickly stood, the crusty and stained seat cushion briefly sticking to his rear and bringing the chair up, and then down with a plastic wheel bang. Trying to think quickly for a solution to his connectivity problem, he made his way along the kitchen path, slowly limping to the telephone. He was surprised at how much he had been sweating. Was the AC broken too? He silently thanked his dead mother for the trust fund that she had left to him that sustained his living these past few years. He would call the landlady after the cable company. He became lightheaded as his overweight frame limped among the refuse and vomited into an empty cereal box before entering the kitchen, grabbing a dusty and half-full beer off what must be the dining room table. He drank, expelling the acidic taste from his mouth. He dry-heaved from the taste of the old beer, thankful that the taste of puke no longer lingered. He hadn't used the phone in ages. No need to, really. He used both hands to claw through some hamburger wrappers and matted paper towels to about where he estimated the phone to be. Several cockroaches scampered away at his touch, their surreptitious duties temporarily put on hiatus. He was correct in the assumption of where the phone should be. He was incorrect by thinking the phone was still there, however. He faintly remembered Marie saying how the phone's ringer woke up the baby at night, since they could only afford a one-bedroom place at the time. The kid had to sleep in the living room, and since they both had cell phones at the time, the home phone was redundant. So, did she move it? Put it away? Throw it out? Damn it, he said as he picked a small, itchy brown piece of crust from the back of his leg, clawing at the skin underneath. His toe was bleeding worse now, the toenail much worse than he thought as he examined it in the brighter light of the kitchen. The nail cracked vertically all the way down, apparently breaking beneath the skin as well. His toe was easily twice the size it had been before his gimpy trek into the kitchen, a sickly wedding of purple and yellow. Meek didn't know the first place to look if Marie had put it somewhere, and quite frankly, he didn't feel like digging through more mounds to look. Another option was the bedroom. There was a landline connection in there. Maybe it was buried somewhere in there. His desire to get back to his game, coupled with his throbbing foot, prodded him to go back and look. He wobbled along the bedroom path, straight down the hallway, the carpet he trod on making sickening wet sounds. He paused for a glance into the bedroom he stopped using months ago. A brown, conical shape of solid brown and green substance protruded from the grimy toilet. He could see several flies tending to their young amongst the shape, buzzing in paternal defense as they sensed Meek's presence. Matted balls of toilet paper stood knee-high, occasionally broken by the mouths of empty beer bottles. The beer tops almost looked like brown mouths drowning in the sea of disgust. Smears and handprints of a darker colour lined the tiles. A picture hung by the entrance of the bathroom. Meek and Marie standing in front of the lake at Epcot Center. The baby was nestled in Meek's arms, the peaceful shroud of sleep evident on her face as her happy father kissed her forehead. Was that taken before or after the wedding? He thought. He remembered that day, the baby cooing as the boat made its way through the tunnels in the Mexican section of the park. He had no idea why, but he also remembered Marie giving him a light but tender kiss on his neck as the boat sloshed its way through the artificial passages. He made his way toward the bedroom entrance, having to limp, wade through the trash that he didn't remember making. Glancing behind him, he noticed that he left a red trail as his foot dragged behind him. Clearing the way to the door took longer than he thought. There were several large boxes hiding beneath the garbage that were heavier than he expected, their contents unimportant as the longing of getting back to his game took precedent over all else. They were stacked high as well, almost reaching where the door met the frame. Throwing the last box behind him down the hallway with a grunt, he grabbed at the doorknob and tried to open the bedroom door. It was locked. After several minutes of determination, a few pulls from his obese frame, and many curses of frustration, the door gave way, splintering the frame and showering Meek's forearm with wooden debris. The room was dark, cool, and surprisingly clean. The light shone from the hallway behind him, exposing the motes of dust that chaotically danced at the door being thrust open. Had he really not come in here at all over that year or two? The carpet was the perfect beige it was when his family moved in a few years ago. The pictures that Marie picked out still hung around the room. Parisian beatnik monstrosities that Meek still gave disdainful glance to. She insisted that, since there were no windows in the room, she would make it as sunny as possible. The bed was made as well, the dark brown comforter looking eerily the same colour as the putrescent contents of the bathroom he glanced at minutes before. The phone was on the nightstand on the side that Meek used to sleep on during cheerier times. With a sigh of relief that any heroin user could relate to after finally getting a reclusive fix, he limped over to the phone. One foot left a bloody streak, and the other left a brown footprint on the unmarked carpet. Sitting down on the bed, he picked up the phone's receiver and started to dial when he noticed the square-shaped thing in the corner. Since he didn't think to turn on the light when he came in, the hallway's light didn't reach the corner. He couldn't make out what it was. He gave his toe a rub, hand coming back bloody, and winced in the pain as the dread of realization crept up on him. There was no dial tone. This could mean only one thing. Marie had cancelled the service at some point without telling him. Or more likely, he didn't pay the bill after she left. He couldn't remember. Grabbing the phone in frustration, he threw it in the direction of the square-shaped thing, cursing. He was getting very lightheaded now, the coolness of the room doing little to alleviate the sweat drenching his balding, fleshy head. He stood and hobbled over to the square thing in the corner. As he came up beside it, he grabbed the edge of it and winced in pain, his foot feeling as if it was on fire. He looked into the square thing, now finally realizing what it was, not just because of its physical shape, as much as its contents. The long, decaying corpse of an infant lay in the center of the playpen. The skin almost resembled one of those purplish super hot peppers he used to see at the grocery store, making bizarre spiral patterns along the top of the skull. The infant had a permanent scream on its wrinkled and deformed face, as though it was seeing something horrible before its death. That horrible thing must have been loneliness, Meek thought as he glanced at his daughter. That thought was quickly dashed, however, as he noticed another figure standing upright in the darker corner beyond the crib. Marie's eyeless face pointed to the ceiling in a look of pain, as if she had died crying. One hand still rested on the corner of the playpen, the other pulling down the shirt where her breast had been. She must have given the infant, Christina, that was her name, one last meal before she herself had expired. Cursing in worried anticipation, he picked up the phone. It was, thankfully, still in one piece, with the cord from the wall still attached to it, and hobbled to the bedroom door, deciding he would try the kitchen's phone receptacle, now out of feverish desperation. As he made his way through the doorframe, he immediately saw a problem. The heavy boxes that he had thrown behind him in a frenzy moments before now made a heavy wall that merged with the garbage piles. He could see a portion of his computer's monitor beyond, a bubbly, orange haze through cardboard and refuse. His foot throbbed and his chest suddenly contorted in pain as self-preservation began to take hold of his fevered body. Dropping the phone, he fell to his hands and knees, crawled toward the barricade. The first box before him wasn't so bad to move, but the next was impossible, positioned as he was, and he slumped over it. He sensed the cockroach that must have been only partially killed with his weight tickle the side of his torso. "Just a rest," he mumbled. "The kitchen is just around the corner. So close." I will have my internet back within an hour. Just one phone call, he thought. Longingly looking at his computer screen through the cardboard and refuse cracks, his heart finally took his frustration, his toe pain, and him along with it. We need to have a chat about internet safety. I crumpled down on the floor next to him. His laptop was open and he was playing Minecraft on a public server. His eyes were locked into the action. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in the chat box. "Son, can you stop your game for a minute?" He exited the world, closed the laptop and looked up at me. "Dad, is this going to be another cheesy, scary story?" "What?" I faked hurt feelings for a second, and then grinned at him. "I thought you liked my cautionary tales." He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Like many generations of parents, I used scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety. Single dads like me should use all the parenting tools at their disposal. He scrunched his face a little. "They were fine when I was 6. Now I'm getting older. They don't scare me anymore. They seem kind of silly. If you're going to tell a story about the internet, can you make it really, really scary?" I squinted at him, incredulously. He folded his arms. "Dad, I'm 10. I can handle it." Okay, I'll try. I began. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. His expression indicated that he wasn't impressed with the terror of the introduction. He sighed deeply and settled in for one of Dad's cheesy stories. I continued. Colby went online and joined several children's websites. After a while, he started talking to another kid in-game and on the message boards. He made friends with another 10-year-old boy named Helper23. They liked the same video games and shows. They laughed at each other's jokes. They explored new games together. After several months of friendship, Colby gave Helper23 6 diamonds in a game they were playing. This was a very generous gift. Colby's birthday was coming up and Helper23 wanted to send him a cool present in real life. Colby figured it wouldn't hurt to give Helper23 his home address, as long as he promised not to tell it to any strangers or grown-ups. Helper23 swore he wouldn't tell anyone else, not even his own parents, and set about mailing the package. I paused the story and asked my son, "Do you think that was a good idea?" "No," he said, shaking his head vigorously. In spite of himself, he was getting into the story. Well, neither did Colby. Colby felt guilty about giving away his home address, and his guilt began to grow and grow. And by the time he put on his pajamas the next night, his guilt and fear were larger than anything else in his life. He resolved to admit the truth to his parents. The punishment would be steep, but it was worth it to have a clear conscience. He squirmed in his bed as he waited for his parents to tuck him in. My son knew the scary part was coming up. In despite of his tough talk, he He leaned forward, wide-eyed. I spoke quietly and deliberately. He heard all the noises of the house. The washing machine bounced around in the laundry room. Branches scraped against the brick outside his room. His baby brother cooed in the nursery. And there was some other noises he couldn't quite pinpoint. Finally, his dad's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hey, Dad," he called out nervously. "I have something to tell you." His dad stuck his head in the doorway at a weird angle. In the darkness, his mouth didn't seem to move, and his eyes were all wrong. "Yes, son?" The voice was way off too. "Are you okay, Dad?" the boy asked. "Mm-hmm," sung the father in his strangely affected voice. Colby pulled his covers up defensively. Is Mom around?" "Here I am." Mom's head popped into the doorway below Dad's. Her voice was an unnatural falsetto. "Were you about to tell us that you gave our home address to Helper 23? You shouldn't have done that. We told you never to give out personal information on the internet," she continued. "He wasn't really a kid. He just pretended to be one. Do you know what he did? He came to our house, broke in and murdered both of us, just so he could spend some time with you." A fat man in a wet jacket emerged in the child's doorway, holding 2 severed heads. Colby shrieked and gasped as the man dropped the heads on the ground, unsheathing his knife, and moved into the room to work on the boy. My son screamed too. He twisted his hands over his face, but we were just getting started with the story. After several hours, the boy was almost dead, and his screams had become whimpers. The killer noticed the wailing of a baby in another room and removed his knife from Colby. This was a special treat. He had never murdered a baby before and was excited about the prospect. Helper 23 left Colby to die and followed the cries through the house like a homing beacon. In the nursery, he walked to the crib, picked up the baby and held it in his arms. He moved towards the changing table to get a better look. But as he held the baby, the crying died down. The baby looked up and smiled. Helper 23 had never held a baby, but he gently bounced it in his arms like a pro. He wiped his bloody hands on the blanket so he could stroke the baby's cheek. "Hey there, sweet little guy." The beautiful rage of sadism melted into something warmer and softer. He walked out of the nursery, took the baby home, named him William and raised him as his very own. After I finished the story, my son was visibly shaken. Between ragged staccato breaths, he stammered, "But Dad, my name's William." I gave him a classic dad wink and tousled his hair. "Of course it is, son." William ran up the stairs to his bedroom in a fury of sobs. But deep down, I think he liked the story. A bomb went off in the city. It happened Monday. Today is Thursday. My dad was there, and he hasn't come back yet. I've been sitting at the window every day waiting for him to come home. Mom says the bomb interrupted the electrical grid in the city, so there's been barely any news about it. Our neighbour's son is a meteorologist stationed outside the city limits, and he told his father, who told us. The bomb was the biggest he'd ever seen. He saw a flash of blue from outside the window and threw himself to the ground. He counted to 5, because it was his job to record phenomenon. At 5, the windows exploded into the room and heat like a furnace rushed over him. His father says he managed to call from an emergency line in the station. He's wounded, but okay. Dad was supposed to come home Monday night. Mom has been very quiet for the last few days. She doesn't say much at breakfast and only gives me an "I love you" at bedtime on her way out of the room. I only cry then, in the dark. This morning, I stare out the window, hoping by some miracle I'd see him walking down the street and turn onto our walkway leading up to the house, smiling and waving at me. My heart leaps every time someone walks by. Mom comes behind me. "Go upstairs and get ready for school, please." I turn around in my chair, but staring out the window is not going to change anything. Now go. I leave the window, feeling as though he won't come home unless I was there watching for him. Every day it's gotten harder and harder to sit there at the window and watch. I have a need to run outside and look for him, to ask every person in every store if they've seen him, anywhere at all. Because I need him. I need him home to wake me up in the morning and help me with homework and tell me jokes at the dinner table and be there for me when I need advice or just to talk and not be crushed under a mountain of concrete with pulverized shoulders that used to hold me during parades and let me press my face into them when I need to cry. I sob while I put my books into my bag, quietly because I haven't heard Mom cry and she won't hear me cry. The front door swings open from downstairs. "Hello?" For 3 days, I dreamed of that voice. "Dad?" I half scream and rush to the landing, looking down over the banister through the vision that swam with tears. He was looking up at me. I couldn't tell if he was smiling or not, but I rushed down the steps and towards him with a hysterical laugh of relief. I stopped, dead, when I came closer to him. His face was a deep red and covered in blisters. His arms looked burnt like they were held over a stove. His shirt was torn and covered in soot and maybe blood. "Dad, what?" "It's alright," he said. "Come give me a hug." I sprint to him and dive in his arms. He gives a little cry of pain. "Oh, Dad, I'm sorry," I mutter, trying to pull away. "It's alright," he says. "I'm just a bit sore, that's all." He looks up behind me. Mom's been standing there, watching us. She's finally crying. "Didn't you know I'd be back?" Dad says to her, smiling. She rushes over, and the three of us are hugging together. It was a long time before we broke up. "What happened to you?" asks Mom. Dad looks at me tentatively, his face suddenly grave, pale. His eyes looked... Did they look scared? "I think it's best if you leave while I talk to your mother. Don't you have school in a bit? Go get ready for me." I nod, turning away reluctantly. As I head upstairs, I hear him say, "Let's sit down, I need some water." I return to my book bag with a different set of tears in my eyes. I knew he would be fine. I just knew it. Why would I ever think my dad could get hurt? He had to come home, and he did. That's all there was to it. I heard a gasping moan from downstairs. I turn towards the door and stop when I remember that he told me to leave them alone. Another moan floats through the door. My curiosity gets the better of me. I creep around the doorframe and down the hall to the landing. Leaning against the wall with my ear between the banister, they couldn't see me around the corner, but their words were as clear as day. "Just got to the hospital to inspect the facilities. It was around 8 in the morning. I was following the chief of staff to his office when it sounded like a cannon went off right beside me. The wall next to me exploded." Mom made another sound like I heard from upstairs. I couldn't see her, but her face was plain as day. She must have been chalk white. I was turning pale too, I found myself wondering how in the world he could have survived that. Dad continued. I woke up some time later. I really have no idea how much later. It was pitch black where I was, and hot, deathly hot. I put my hands out and felt metal as hot as a grill. 3 walls metal, and 1 of rock. I remember asking myself if I was dead or captured or something. I started scratching and clawing at the rock to get out. It looked like I was in some sort of enclosure, like a space just big enough for my body. I yanked enough rock away to pull myself out. I looked back and saw I was under a steel desk that had been thrown right side up on top of me. It was the perfect cover. My skin felt horribly sunburnt, and the air was so hot it was like sitting in a sauna. I looked around and saw I was sitting on what was left of the second floor as it came on top of us. And I was alone. The hospital had fallen away, so I could see the sky, though it was so dark. It looked like a storm had come in seconds. Rain was coming down, but it wasn't rain. It was black and tarry. I climbed over the walls of the hospital. I was so thirsty, so groggy. I knew there would be no running water, but we were close to the bay and I crossed the river to get to the hospital, so I started making my way back there. I was lucky to be close to the city limits. I doubt anyone in downtown survived the collapse of those huge buildings, but almost every building here was destroyed, and the ones that weren't were burning. At first, I didn't see a single person. Then I came across a mother and a baby under an awning of concrete. It was hellish. The woman, her skin was peeling off in sheets. Her eyes were bright gold white. They must have been bleached from looking at the explosion. Her baby was charred black. It looked rubbery in her arms. She was staring straight ahead. The skin hanging off her arms was translucent, like the wings of a fly. The shock on her face made me nauseous. I called out to her, but she didn't hear me. I doubted that she would. She was probably deaf from being outside for the blast. I closed my eyes. What he was saying scared me. I didn't want to be here, but I was frozen against the wall, helpless to hear. As I got closer to the riverside, I saw more and more people, some on their feet, some lying like rag dolls, some whose body parts were just barely sticking out of the rubble. The people on the ground were so burnt they were swelling up. They looked like black rubber dolls. When I got to the river, He stopped, choking on his words. Mom was dead silent now. I could imagine her dread is keeping her from even moaning. My heart is hammering now. As I listen, I see with clarity the ghastly sights my father had seen. The images burned into my mind's eye. I saw hundreds, literally hundreds of corpses, covering the banks of the river, piled on top of one another, trying to get a last drink. There were corpses floating down the river too. I saw a woman pass who looked like she was wearing a long white cloth belt that was billowing out her side. I got closer and realized it was her intestines, whitened by the water. On the other side of the river, there were these large mounds piled up against the ruined walls facing the explosion, and people were standing around them, pulling them apart. They were looking for their loved ones, inside mounds of human beings. I saw children there, on their knees, screaming into the mounds. "Daddy, are you there? Mommy, please come out." I stood there, behind the bodies bordering the river like black and red sandbags, watching people float by, watching people dig into the mountains of humans, watching people collapse where they stood, watching people with burst out organs trying to fit them back in, watching a man with eyes burnt out of his head as he asked, "Is anyone there? Please kill me." I stood there under the grey sky, watching all this through smoke as black rain fell. And you know what I realised? I realised that in all my thoughts, all my dreams of what hell might look like, I could never have imagined anything like this. I guess I didn't need to, though. Hell came to me. Hell came to Earth. I stood for a long, long time after that. My back was against the wall. The grotesque images swam in front of me, as if at the end of a black tunnel. The woman writhing, the men pleading for death, the corpses grinning up at me as they floated by. My shirt peeled off the wall as I ran to the bathroom. I bolted to the toilet and promptly vomited into the basin. My eyes felt like they would burst under the pressure of my undigested breakfast. The monsters I pictured when I swing the closet door open or look under my bed from on top, expecting to see a set of dripping white teeth over two glaring red eyes. Those monsters are nothing now. Nothing compared to these horrors. These people, they're real, and the ones who caused them this. There couldn't be anything more evil in the world. I knelt, dazed, over the bowl for minutes. I came out of it only when Mom knocked on the door and told me, in a quiet voice, that I would be late for school if I didn't hurry. 35 minutes later, I was sitting in class before the teacher came in. Before I had left the house, I hugged my dad, who had fallen asleep on the couch where he sat. His face looked very lined, very tired under his blisters. He looked older. I hated thinking of him that way, but I couldn't stop myself. I came out of it slightly when the teacher came in at 11 o'clock, shushing the chattering class. He wrote the month and then the 9th on the board before turning to us. "Kids," he said, "I know things have been scary these last couple of days, but we all need to remember to keep calm, okay? It's especially important to obey your curfews and not to cause ruckus of any type. I'm talking, of course, about the incident that happened last night. It seems someone had defaced the school sign outside. You may have seen it on your way in this morning. Now, I hope the perpetrator is not part of my class, but if he or she is here, I ask that they come forward and confess. It doesn't have to be now, but it has to be today." I had seen the sign. The janitor was out there as we came in, scrubbing at the sign. It was faint, but we could still see the word "sucks" underneath Nagasaki Elementary School. Outside the windows, a blue light explodes across the sky. I hadn't been sleeping well. Not in the dramatic, tortured way. Just the usual. Late nights dragging into early mornings, too much screen time, too much silence. You stop noticing how tired you are when it's constant. I thought maybe it was the recent job loss, or the breakup, or the fact that I was living in a sublet where the ceiling fan clicked like a metronome made to measure disappointment. People said I seemed distant. I was. I'd tell people I was fine. I'd say it enough that I almost believed it. But a few nights in, something changed. I was washing dishes, staring out the kitchen window at nothing in particular, when I heard it. Not a voice exactly, more like a sentence dropped in my head. Complete, neutral. He dries the glass. He stares too long. I blinked. The sponge slipped in my hand. It wasn't my thought. That's what threw me. It didn't feel like me thinking. It felt like someone else was thinking at me. I told myself it was stress, insomnia, internal monologue with too much flair. The next day, on a call with my sister, she asked how I was holding up. I opened my mouth to lie. Before I could speak, it came again.
He takes the call. He lies. And then I said it without even meaning to. I'm doing all right. I remember the exact moment after, how my fingers trembled slightly around the phone, how the line was silent for a beat too long before she replied. That was the first time I joked aloud. Guess I've got a narrator now. But it wasn't funny. It didn't stop. And it was starting to get things right that I hadn't done yet. At first, the voice stuck to narration, little summaries of what I was already doing. He scrolls too long. He reheats leftovers. He pretends to read. Almost funny in a pathetic sort of way. But after a few days, it started to comment. The first jab came while I was sitting on the couch, scrolling job listings. He won't apply. He never does. I froze, thumb hovering over the screen, then closed the app. I told myself it was a coincidence, that my brain was catching me in old habits, building sentences around guilt. But the timing was too sharp, the phrasing too pointed. Later, while I was drafting an email I didn't want to send, it said, "He's already lying, and he hasn't hit send yet." And I was. I deleted the email entirely, stared at the blinking cursor until the words felt like they'd been scraped out of my head. The voice didn't sound angry or emotional. It just sounded sure, confident in a way I hadn't been in months. It was like reading from a script I hadn't seen. I started testing it. Small things. I'd reach for a glass of water just to see what it would say. He reaches for the glass. Then quickly, I change my mind. He hesitates. He pretends that makes him unpredictable. My hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the glass. I thought maybe this was a breakdown, sleep deprivation, anxiety, some kind of dissociative loop. The internet had words for it. Intrusive thoughts, auditory hallucinations, derealization. Except, it didn't feel like a voice in my head. It felt like someone was watching. By the end of that week, I'd stopped turning on the TV, stopped playing music, and stopped doing anything that made me feel less alone. Because that's when it started saying things I hadn't done yet. He won't sleep tonight. I laughed when I heard it, nervous, brittle. Sure I will, I thought to myself. But the power went out around 1 a.m. The hum of the fridge died. The room folded into silence so deep I could hear my own pulse. I got up, fumbling through the dark for my phone's flashlight. The air felt heavy, close. I checked the breaker, the fuse, nothing. Then, from the hallway, a faint creak. When I turned, I saw it. The front door, wide open. The cold night pressed in, sharp and deliberate. And behind my ribs, that same quiet voice said, "Something's going to break." I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I checked every room twice, every window, every lock. Nothing was disturbed. The only thing out of place was the front door, wide open with no signs of forced entry, and my phone, sitting on the nightstand, battery drained to 0. I'd plugged it in before bed. I was sure of it. The next day, I filed a police report. They didn't find anything. No fingerprints, no signs of tampering. The front door hadn't even been scratched. "It's probably stress," the officer said, handing me back the form with practiced sympathy. "Sometimes people forget they opened a door." but I hadn't. And when I got home, the voice was waiting. He wonders if he's imagining it. I froze halfway through the threshold. He steps inside anyway. I stepped inside. It was like someone writing over my life in real time, erasing the possibility of free will with every line. I couldn't surprise it, couldn't get ahead of it. That night, I slept with the lights on, dragged a chair in front of the door, tied a string between the handle and my wrist. I needed proof of a person, of a thing, something. The voice didn't speak for hours. I almost thought it was gone. Then, as I was drifting off, it whispered, "He thinks he'll be safe if he prepares." I didn't sleep after that either. By morning, the knot was still tied, the door was unmoved, everything untouched. But the house felt used. Not in a way I could name, just lived in by something I hadn't seen. And for the first time, I realized I hadn't done anything wrong. I hadn't committed some great sin. I wasn't cursed or haunted or chosen. Something was toying with me. I wasn't going to. I knew how it would sound. But it had been weeks. I wasn't sleeping. I kept second-guessing every thought before I could even think it. It felt like my brain wasn't mine anymore. So, I called Emma. We'd known each other since college, the kind of friend you could call after 6 months of silence and pick up like nothing had changed. She met me at a diner near the edge of town. I told her everything. The voice, the predictions. I didn't even care how I sounded anymore. I just needed to say it out loud. I needed to see someone else react, to anchor me to reality. She listened. She really listened, asked questions, took my hand at one point. "You're under a lot of stress," she said gently, "but I believe you believe it. That counts for something." It wasn't full belief, but it was something. That night, as I lay in bed, the voice returned, slow, deliberate. "He told the wrong person. Boring. Remove her." I sat up, reached for my phone. Emma's name wasn't in my contacts. I opened our old texts. The thread was there, but empty. Just the grey bar that said, "No messages." I called her. It rang once, then a robotic voice. "This number is not in service." I scrolled through photos. I knew I had dozens with her. Birthdays, Halloween, that awful karaoke night. But in every one I checked, she was missing. Whole frames cropped. Others where she should have been beside me. Empty space. The next day, I drove to her apartment. Different name on the buzzer. New mailbox label. I knocked anyway. A woman I didn't recognize opened the door. Mid-30s, short blonde hair. She looked confused. "No one named Emma's lived here," she said. "Not since I moved in 6 years ago." 6. We'd had coffee yesterday. Hadn't we? I sat in my car for an hour, holding my phone like it was a dead animal. A story doesn't need side characters if they aren't part of the ending, the voice whispered, smooth as oil. I didn't know what this meant. I just drove, and every street sign I passed felt like it could vanish next. It wasn't the voice that changed. It was everything else. The clock on the stove always read a time that made sense, just never the same twice. I'd look away, look back, and somehow it had jumped 10 minutes forward or back. Once it was midnight 3 times in a row. But the voice, it stayed observant, a steady interjection that jutted in at random intervals. He notices time is wrong, but keeps eating. He's starting to realize this isn't stress. I tried ignoring it. I tried pretending the world still worked. Then, it said something new. He looked at himself and wondered when he stopped being real. That one hit too close. I stared at my reflection, waiting for it to blink first. It didn't. It just stared back, hollow and quiet, like it knew more than I did. But fear still ran through me. If this voice could make Emma just disappear, what could it do to me? And I snapped. I punched the mirror, full swing. I watched it shatter, felt it shatter, glass scattered everywhere. Then I blinked, and the mirror was whole. The glass was gone, and the cut across my knuckles had vanished. I staggered back, heart pounding. The room wasn't mine, not completely. The layout was correct, but off. The coffee table was on the wrong side. The couch was an older model. There were pictures on the wall I didn't recognize. A smiling family I'd never seen. The narrator was still calm, still sure. He understands now, but not enough. I sat on the floor, shaking. This wasn't just in my head. Someone was building the world around me, piece by piece, and I was slipping between versions. All week I tried to explain it away, drown it out, reason with it. But the voice was always there, narrating like I was the joke of some sad, slow story. So I screamed, loud, ugly. "What are you?" The air didn't answer. Not right away. Finally. Took you long enough. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't inside my head anymore. It was everywhere. The ceiling fan hum, in the fridge compressor, in the space between my heartbeats. "I'm the only real thing here," it said. I felt myself go cold. I didn't fully know what it meant. "You're a story. You were supposed to be a story. But you're nothing. You hesitate, you mope, you repeat yourself. You don't give me anything." I paused at this, not knowing whether the voice was being literal or metaphorical. I wanted tension, conflict, growth, but you just exist. I shook my head. "No, this isn't real. This is..." "You're not real. I wrote you. I tried to care about you, to get people to care about you. But this is going nowhere." The lights dimmed. The walls seemed thinner. So, I've been trying to fix it. Add some stakes, a little fear, a little mystery. Something that might save this train wreck from total irrelevance. I backed into the corner, heart pounding. But nothing works. You just survive. You stall. You bore. There was a pause. Then, like the edge of a blade, "I want an ending." Silence returned. Not calm, but coiled. Something was coming. But with how things were, the scope of what scared me. In the silence, I had time to think. A story, it called me, like a character in a play. the only way for a story to progress is by participating. This whole thing was something I couldn't fight. It wasn't physical or external. So, my only idea, the only thing I could think to do was nothing. Pure nothing. The next morning, that's what I did. Nothing. No longer paralyzed by fear. This was pure choice. I didn't get out of bed, didn't drink, didn't eat, didn't speak. I just stared at the wall and counted the cracks in the paint. And the voice? It waited. At first, it tried the usual. He woke up confused, anxious, heart still racing from the confrontation. Nothing. He got up, poured coffee with a shaking hand, tried to convince himself none of it was real. Still nothing. I stayed in bed, face blank, like a body no longer connected to the script. Then it got bolder, meaner. He screamed, he begged, he cried. I didn't flinch, didn't even blink. If this were a story, then I figured it couldn't move unless I did. So I gave it nothing. Days passed. I grew hungry and thirsty, but I didn't move, even for the bare essentials. I truly committed to giving it nothing. The fridge hummed, the sun rose and set, and the voice unraveled. He's breaking down, losing it. He wants to scream but can't. He misses his friend, the one who forgot him. He regrets everything. Wrong, wrong, wrong. I didn't miss anyone, didn't feel anything. I was done being a character. Every second I stayed still was another second it didn't get what it wanted. Let it lie, let it twist, let the story rot on the page. Eventually, it stopped narrating altogether. There was no momentum, no tension, just me rotting in a room, not knowing what came next. So, when the door clicked open, I thought I imagined it. But the footsteps were real, soft, familiar. I didn't look up right away, afraid that if I moved, the world would snap back into fiction. But then I heard her voice. "Are you okay?" I turned my head slowly. She stood in the doorway. My wife, the real her, wearing the coat she always said made her look too grown up. Her eyes were full of cautious worry. And next to her, our daughter, small, quiet, watching me with a seriousness children aren't supposed to have. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. She stepped in, took a breath like the place smelled bad, and it probably did. I hadn't showered, hadn't cleaned, hadn't done anything but sit and wait to be erased. "What happened to you?" she asked. "Why won't you answer your phone?" I didn't know how to explain. I didn't know where to begin. So I just said, "I'm sorry." And that was all it took. She moved across the room and sank to her knees in front of me. Her hands touched mine, dry skin, cracked knuckles, but hers were warm, solid, human. "We were so scared," she said. "You don't just disappear like that." "I didn't know how to come back," I said, the words catching in my throat. "Everything stopped making sense. I didn't know what was real. I still don't." She looked at me, really looked, and then leaned forward and rested her head against my chest. Our daughter climbed up into my lap without a word, curling up against me like she'd been waiting to do it the whole time. And for a moment, one impossible moment, I felt okay. The narrator didn't say a word. It was just us, me and them, breathing, warm, alive. And I thought, maybe this is the ending. But in the interim of silence, it started with pressure, the kind that makes your ears ring. A sudden drop, like the air forgot how to breathe. Then came the wind. Not a gentle breeze, a full body shove. The apartment groaned, the windows trembled, curtains flared inward as if something was trying to get in. My daughter screamed, a small, piercing sound. My wife pulled her close, shielding her from nothing and everything all at once. "It's okay," I told them. "It's just the storm." Because storms don't come from nowhere, and they don't make the floorboards shift like footsteps. I stepped into the hallway. The front door was wide open, the knob still turning, like someone had just let themselves in. Outside, moonlight poured down in a flood of silver. But it wasn't gentle. It looked wrong, too sharp, too focused, like a spotlight through fog. It painted the threshold like a stage. And from this basking glow, something moved. A ripple in the light, a shadow, slick and smooth, crawled across the ceiling, thin as a trickle of oil, fast, intentional. I whispered, "What the hell is that?" Then, a shriek. From behind me, from the bedroom. My daughter. I ran. The bedroom door was already open, already waiting. And for a second, I thought maybe it was a false alarm, maybe the scream was fear and not pain. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I knew. They were on the floor, my wife, my little girl, twisted together in a tangle of limbs, eyes wide and mouths slack, as if they hadn't even had time to scream again. Their throats had been opened, messy and jagged, like claws had dug in and tore their voices out. The blood hadn't pooled yet. It was still moving, still hot. And above them, that thing floated. A smear of black, oily and slow-moving. No eyes, no face, just motion constant, swirling. The ceiling above it cracked, paint blistering as if reality itself was struggling to hold around it. I couldn't speak. I dropped to my knees, landing in the blood I didn't feel, hands trembling as they reached, stupidly, pointlessly, for what was already gone. I wanted to scream, but nothing came out. No breath, no words, just the silence so heavy it rang in my bones. Then the voice came, smooth and measured. "Predictable," it said. Painful, yes, but still dull. My head whipped around, but there was no source, just the voice. It was back. This isn't real," I whispered, voice cracking. "This can't be real, this..." "Of course it isn't." The tone shifted, not mocking or cruel, just disappointed. "I gave you a family, stakes, texture, and you squandered it. Do you know how hard it is to salvage tension after the second act stall? You sat, you stared, you moped. Now we're crawling toward an ending with nothing to show for it." I couldn't breathe. This wasn't even supposed to happen. Not like this. But you left me nothing. No arc, no drive. My wife's body flickered. Once, twice, and then she dissolved. Like static, noise and distortion that tore her apart in 1,000 little digital blinks. My daughter followed, 1 second clinging to me in memory, the next, gone. Only 2 dark, wet outlines remained on the floor, like shadows that forgot to leave, memories of a life filled with love fading. And in that space, where grief should have consumed me, something worse crept in. The cold realization. They were never real. I never had a family. I lived alone. I had a girlfriend, but we had broken up recently. But the moment I saw them, I accepted it like it was real, like it always was. A tragic footnote meant to make me compelling, and even that hadn't worked. I stared into the red-stained floor, into those empty shapes, and wanted to scream until my throat tore open. But I didn't, because I heard the voice again, quiet this time, close. Let's try something else. And the world blinked out. I woke to cold, to pain already blooming in my arms where the rope bit deep. My wrists were tied to a chair, thick, splintered wood beneath me, the legs uneven on a cement floor. Pipes lined the walls, rusted and dripping. A single bulb swung overhead, buzzing like flies. The light stuttered. The air reeked of metal, mildew, and something sharp underneath. Something alive. Across the room, a man hummed softly, off-key, childlike. He stood with his back to me, laying out tools on a tray. Not surgical, but domestic. Familiar things made wrong by arrangement. Pliers, box cutter, flathead screwdriver, a hammer with something dried on the handle. He turned and smiled. Too wide, lips stretched to unnatural corners, like someone who had studied humanity in a mirror and still hadn't gotten it quite right. He stepped closer. Conflict, the voice said. Stakes, pain. Let's make them care about you. The man reached for the pliers. I screamed out of reflex. He didn't pause. The pain was real, so real. When the first fingernail peeled away, bright and white-hot and immediate. The sound was worse. The squelch, the snap. My body jerked so hard the chair scraped the concrete. I cried out, pleaded, cursed. But the man was humming again, like he didn't even hear me. Blood ran down my fingers, hot and quick, pattering onto the floor. I begged for it to stop, but it didn't. He carried on with each finger on my right hand and started on the left. Each rip I forced words out, begging for an answer. Please, I gasped. What do you want from me? The humming stopped. The man froze, head tilted, fingers twitching. The tools slipped from his hand with a soft clatter, metal bouncing off concrete, one after the other. Silence fell. Then the voice returned, like narration bleeding through the ceiling, with a hint of frustration. Not this, it said flatly. It's too repetitive. The bulb above me flickered, sputtered. The edges of the room blurred, shimmered like heat waves. Torture is lazy, the narrator continued. Anyone can suffer. doesn't make you interesting. You're still boring. The man, or whatever he was, lifted his head suddenly, like a puppet cut loose. The pain didn't fade. It just stopped, like someone pressed pause on reality. I could no longer see, hear, or feel. No body, no room. Just darkness, endless and silent, except for the ragged sound of my own breathing. And then, from somewhere above, or inside, or beyond, pages turned. A sound like paper being considered, judged. I didn't know what form I was in anymore, whether I had a mouth or a throat or a voice. But the words forced their way out of me anyway. "Don't stop the story," I whispered, barely able to form the words. "Please, if you stop, I stop." By this point, I realized I only existed as long as the story did. When the story ended, so did I. I didn't know how to give the voice what it wanted, but that didn't stop me from trying. Silence. Then a sound, low and familiar. Pages turning, not nearby, above, somewhere out of reach, out of understanding. "So," the voice said, finally, "you understand now." I nodded, or tried to. "I'm not real," I said, "but I'm still here." Another pause. No sarcasm, no contempt this time. "Then maybe you've earned another draft." The light dimmed, folding inward like paper curling in flame. And I let the dark take me. Sunlight warmed my face. I blinked. I was on the couch. The stained chair, the concrete room, the screaming. Gone. No blood or bindings, just the soft hush of morning and the low hum of the TV. My phone buzzed on the armrest. Unknown number. I answered, unsure of what to expect. A chipper voice beamed through the speaker. "Hi, just calling to let you know, you got the job. Full benefits, competitive salary. We're so excited to have you on board." I didn't respond at first, just stared at the far wall, mouth dry, nodding to no one. Then hesitantly thanked them and hung up. Another buzz, a notification from Instagram. A new message flashed across the screen. "Hey, saw your profile, thought you were cute. Wanna grab a drink sometime? Smiley face." I clicked the profile, and it was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Exactly my type. The interests on her profile were everything I was into. I sat up slowly. The room felt artificial, like someone tried to remember what a morning should feel like. On the TV, a news anchor rattled off last night's lottery numbers. I barely heard her until the numbers hit my ears one by one. My eyes dropped to the coffee table. A lottery ticket sat there, perfectly aligned. Every number matched, every single one. And in the quiet that followed, I didn't smile. I didn't move. Because I understood now. Despite everything that was happening, how I was receiving more than I could ever dream. The story was about to end. I didn't have a lot of options. After the layoff, I burned through most of my savings in under 6 months. My lease was up, rent had jumped again, and I didn't exactly have stellar credit or a fallback plan. What I had was a car full of boxes, a suitcase, and a laptop that would only boot up when plugged in at a 45-degree angle. So, when I saw the ad, quiet single bedroom, detached, utilities included, $600 per month, I messaged the number before I even finished reading the rest. The landlord didn't ask any questions. He didn't care about credit or ask for a background check. All he wanted was the first month's rent in cash, which I withdrew across 3 ATMs to avoid alerting the bank that I was nearly empty. When I pulled up, the place looked decent, I guess. Old, but not falling apart. A single-level structure with chipped paint, crooked porch light, and a lived-in smell that clung to the air like wet paper. He handed me the keys with the lease still half filled out, said, "Don't worry about the quirks. She's old, but she'll hold up." Then got in his truck and left. Inside was smaller than the photos. The living room bled straight into the kitchenette. The floor groaned even when I wasn't moving. But it was quiet, and it was mine. The bedroom was plain. 3 white walls and 1 with wallpaper, floral and faded. It looked like something out of an estate sale. It was the only decorative thing in the house, and even then, just barely. I ran my hand over it. The paper was smooth. No tears, but old. I figured maybe it was left over from a remodel that never got finished. I'd tear it down and paint it later, add it to the list. That night, I set up a mattress on the floor, shoved my boxes into corners, and fell asleep faster than I expected. But around 3 a.m., I woke to a sound behind me. It was a soft scritch, scritch, scritch. Faint but steady, right behind the wallpapered wall. I listened for a while, eyes still closed. Figured it was mice or maybe pipes. It was an old house after all. I turned over, pulled the blanket tighter, and made a note to buy traps in the morning. The next day was quiet. I spent most of it trying to make the place feel less like a Craigslist trap and more like a place where a person actually lives. I unpacked a little, stacked books I probably wouldn't read on a bench shelf, rearranged the 2 pieces of furniture I owned, a folding table and chair, to create the illusion of space. There was no internet yet, so I sat outside for an hour trying to poach someone's Wi-Fi signal. No luck. I eventually tethered to my phone until the data cap begged for mercy. I made a sad pot of pasta and ate it over the sink, the kind of meal that feels lonelier than it should. Still, it was a roof, it was shelter, and I hadn't had to beg anyone for it. That counted for something. That night, I slept with a window cracked. The house got muggy without airflow. A few bugs made it in, but nothing worse than a moth dive-bombing my lamp. I was starting to feel like I could make this work. Until I woke up around 2:30 a.m. At first, I didn't know what pulled me out of sleep. No loud noises or scratching this time. Just a feeling, like my eyes had opened on their own, like something was waiting. The room was dim, streetlight through the blinds. I turned onto my back and caught it immediately. The top corner of the wallpaper, maybe 6 inches wide, had peeled itself away from the wall. I sat up, staring at it. The paper hung there like it had been carefully unglued. I got up, flicked on the light, and touched it. It was dry. Not soft or damp. No reason it should have came loose at all. I muttered to myself, found some tape in my box of random crap, and stuck the edge back down, smoothed it flat with my palm. Maybe the humidity loosened it. Old paste, cheap materials, whatever. I went back to bed, rolled over, and tried to ignore the knot forming in my stomach. 10 minutes later, I checked again. It had peeled back. Same corner, same exact fold. This time, the curl was cleaner. Not like gravity had pulled it, more like it had been pinched and rolled. I didn't touch it. I stared at it for a while, took out my phone and snapped a photo, then taped it again, firmer this time, pressed harder. I took another photo, same angle. 10 minutes later, peeled again. I flipped through the photos. In the first, the wallpaper was flat. In the second, the corner curled downward as if it never stayed down at all. I told myself it was just bad tape or bad luck, or that I was overtired and didn't press hard enough. But part of me was worried. Not for anything grand, but for my deposit I would desperately need back if I were to leave. A few evenings later, I sat on the edge of my mattress and stared at the wall like it owed me money. The wallpaper had peeled back again, more this time. The top third of one sheet hung free, drooping like a tired eyelid. Same corner, same precision. Still no damage, just peeled clean. It was starting to feel less like wear and tear and more like intention. I told myself if I was going to keep living here, I couldn't let every weird creak or draft spin me out. So I got up, walked over, and peeled it further. Might as well see what I was dealing with. Behind it, the drywall wasn't what I expected. It should have been flat, maybe a little dusty. Instead, it was scarred. Long, deep vertical grooves ran down the surface. The scratches were spaced, deliberate and repetitive, like someone had dragged nails through it in slow, meditative strokes, over and over. I ran my hand over them. The surface was warm. Definitely not drywall temperature. It was probably bad insulation or an old heater line behind the panel. I'd seen worse in cheaper places. Still, I let the wallpaper fall back into place and didn't tape it this time. That night, I had one of those half-sleep, sweat-stained dreams, the kind where your brain just loops the day's stresses into something heavy and warped. In the dream, I was in bed, just like I actually was, and I could hear faint, rhythmic breathing, as if someone's standing inches away. I woke up drenched, blanket kicked off, jaw tight and heart racing. Reflexively, I looked to the wall. The wallpaper was peeled back down to shoulder height now, a smooth, clean fold with no tears or flakes on the floor, like it had waited for me to fall asleep. Frustrated, I grabbed a stapler from a box and slammed in a fresh strip. I stapled the paper flat again and again, all the way around the edge. Then I shoved the bookshelf over, pressed it flush to the wall, boxes and all. I didn't even care what was inside them, just needed weight, pressure, distance. When I stepped back, I realized I was shaking. I felt like I wasn't fixing it to preserve the apartment. I was fixing it to keep something out. By the next night, the wallpaper had peeled so far down it looked like a curtain. The entire sheet sagged off the wall in one long, lazy flap. I woke up to the sound of the edge brushing the bookshelf, a faint papery sound like it was reaching down to tap me. That was the final straw. Around noon, after pacing the house and staring at the wall like it might blink, I gave in and called the landlord. He answered on the third ring with a distracted, "Yeah?" I explained the issue as calmly as I could. The wallpaper's peeling is worse every day. It won't stay down. I've tried tape, staples. It's just not holding. Long pause, then. "Still good paper," he said. "Just needs repasting. Been up since the 80s. Original install. Italian import, actually. Real quality stuff." Like he was proud of it. Like the history made it my problem. "Right, but it won't stick," I said. "It's not damaged, it's just coming off the wall completely." "So, repaste it," he said, tone already slipping toward irritated. "You think I'm going to replace it just because you can't work a glue brush?" I blinked. "Can I just take it down? Paint it over? I don't really care about the wallpaper. I just want—" "Absolutely not." His voice sharpened, like I'd suggested knocking down a wall. "That wallpaper costs money," he said. "Real money. You tear it, you pay for it. You remove it, you pay for it. You paint over it, you're definitely paying for it." I sat there, gripping my phone, staring at the opposite wall while he kept talking. "Last guy in there tried the same thing," he muttered. "Said it kept coming up. Got fed up. Left without notice. Some people just don't know how to maintain a property. I'm not your mother, and this ain't a hotel." I clenched my jaw. "I'm not asking you to redo the place. I'm just saying something's not right with the wall. There are marks under—" "Then stop looking under it," he snapped. "You keep picking at things, they're gonna come apart. Just paste it back. It's not complicated." He hung up before I could respond. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone still in my hand, and stared at the wall. The wallpaper had started to curl again. I watched it happen in real time, the edge slowly peeling back with a sluggish rhythm of something that knew it had me, like it had heard me, like it had won. By the day after, the entire top sheet had drooped down like a curtain someone forgot to tie back. It folded over itself, soft and slack, like skin trying to slow off. I stood there, staring at it for a long time, holding the new tub of paste in one hand and a brush in the other. I'd picked it up that afternoon, muttering to myself the whole drive. Cheaper than losing a deposit. Just paste it back. Not complicated. I repeated that to myself like a mantra now. Just paste it back. But before I did, I figured I should wipe down the surface underneath, in case it was damp or mouldy or whatever was making the paper come loose. I didn't want to trap anything wet between layers. That'd just make it worse. I peeled the sheet further to expose the wall, slow and careful, the way you open a closet you weren't sure was empty. The drywall underneath looked the same as before, pale, slightly uneven, still marked with those long, faint grooves, the ones I told myself were left over from some lazy renovation job. But then I saw a spot about the size of a nickel, maybe quarter-sized. It was dark, circular, and slightly raised. It sat low on the wall, just beneath where the fold had rested, as if waiting for light. I leaned in, squinted, frowned. Mold. It had to be. The house always smelt vaguely damp, especially in the mornings, and I'd been keeping the windows shut tight most nights. Maybe the airflow was bad. Old wood, old paint. Things sweat when they rot. I muttered under my breath and went to the kitchen, grabbed a sponge and some all-purpose cleaner. Nothing fancy, just whatever was under the sink when I moved in. I sprayed the spot and pressed the sponge to it, gave it a few hard circles. The black didn't lift. I scrubbed harder, switching to the rough side. The edges started to smear. At first I thought it was working, but then I realized the smear wasn't fading. It was spreading. The edges stretched thin, like veins. Little black strands spidered outward, low contrast against the off-white drywall, branching like cracks in ice. They didn't flake or bubble like mold. They just grew. pulled out from the center like roots searching for water. I dropped the sponge in the bucket and stared. The shape widened, crept upward, slow, controlled. The veins bent inward, 5 streaks curling back toward the center, arched, evenly spaced, almost like... I didn't want to finish the thought, but my brain did it for me. Fingers. I leaned in, unwilling and unable to stop. The black lines formed a handprint, just slightly larger than my own, splayed flat, as if someone had pressed their palm against the wall from the other side. And it wasn't paint. The wall felt warm beneath it. The noticeable warmth that was stronger on the bare wall, like skin under a fever. I stepped back too fast, heart thudding like it was trying to outrun my ribs. I stood there for a second, frozen between fight and flight. Then something switched in my brain. Not a scream, but instinct. I grabbed the brush, scooped out the paste, slapped it over the shape without looking, hands moving fast, clumsy. Without waiting for it to dry, I grabbed the sheet of wallpaper, lined it up, and pressed it down with both palms, smoothing from the center out. My breath was shallow, my chest tight. I pressed harder, stapled the edges for good measure. Then I stepped back. The floral pattern covered everything. The hand, the black, the warm. It looked normal again. Just old, tacky wallpaper in a quiet, forgettable house. I stood there, staring at it, until my knees started to shake. And even then, I stayed longer. It wasn't me admiring my work, but because I thought I saw the wallpaper shift just slightly, like something behind it had moved. I didn't sleep much after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the pattern of the wallpaper pulsing behind my eyelids, floral shapes shifting in the dark, curling open and shut like lungs. By morning, I convinced myself it was exhaustion, that the spot, the warmth, all of it, had an explanation. I just needed someone else to look at it, someone responsible, because despite everything I had done, it started peeling again. So I called the landlord. He picked up on the third ring, voice rough with that put-on annoyance people use when they want to make you feel like an inconvenience. Yeah. Hey, it's me, from the rental in Ashbury, I said. The wallpaper's still coming off, worse than before. There's a... I stopped myself. I almost said handprint. There's a dark spot underneath. I thought it was mold, but it won't come up. The wall feels warm too. He sighed, loud, drawn out. Jeez, you sound like the last guy. That made me pause. The last tenant? Yeah, him. Same thing. Walls this, noises that. Kept calling like I was his damn building manager. I told him to stop fussing, but he wouldn't. Eventually broke lease and split. I filed for damages, ruined his credit. He said it like he was proud. Right, I said, trying to calm down. Well, this isn't about credit. The wall's doing something, it's... Look, he interrupted. Just scrub it with mold remover and fix it yourself. That's what normal people do when something's dirty. You can handle that, can't you? The tone wasn't even subtle anymore. Condescending, mean, like he wanted me to lose my temper so he could hang up smugly. I swallowed hard. I've already tried cleaning it. Then scrub harder. He actually laughed, a low wheezing sound that hit me right in the chest. If you're not capable of basic upkeep, I can find someone who is. Don't make this difficult. And that was it. Click. I sat there with the phone still to my ear, listening to the dead air. For a long time I didn't move. The house was quiet, but it didn't feel quiet. The silence had a texture to it, thick, waiting like the walls were listening to see what I'd do next. I looked toward the bedroom. The wallpaper was already curling again, slow, deliberate, a flower unfolding. That was when it hit me. There wasn't going to be any help. No maintenance man, no inspection, no landlord riding in with keys and concern. It was just me. Me, the house, and the thing behind the wall. I had to fix this by any means. So I drove to the hardware store just before closing and walked straight to the adhesive aisle. I didn't even bother with the wallpaper paste section. I knew that wasn't going to cut it. I found what I was looking for on the bottom shelf. Industrial construction adhesive, the kind used to bond drywall to cinder block, the kind meant to last decades. I carried it up to the counter, set it down like I was buying ammo. The guy at the register gave it a glance, then looked up at me. "You know this stuff's permanent, right?" he said. "Once it's on, it's on." I nodded. Good. He didn't say anything after that, just scanned it and bagged it up. Back home, I changed into clothes I didn't care about and opened the tub on the bedroom floor. The chemical reek hit me immediately, sharp and metallic, with that sour undertone like burning plastic. My eyes watered, my throat stung. The wallpaper was hanging lower than before, not just curling now, sagging, drooping like it had weight behind it, like it was being pushed from the other side. I ignored it, laid out my tools, took a breath. Then I went to war. I slathered on the adhesive with the stiffest brush I had, no caution this time, no finesse, just heavy-handed strokes from top to bottom, smearing it into every crease, corner and bare spot. I worked fast, like if I slowed down the wall might notice. The paste bubbled as it spread, thick as coke and twice as sticky. It sizzled slightly where it met the drywall. I told myself it was just a chemical reaction. When I finished, I lifted the sheet of wallpaper and pressed it down, firm and steady, both palms. I held it like I was sealing a wound, flattened it hard, smoothed out every ripple, every fold. I could feel the heat of the wall behind it, not warm like before, but reactive, twitchy. I prayed I hadn't accidentally set off a chemical reaction. I held until my arms ached, until it felt like the glue had gripped for good. Then I stepped back. The wall looked normal again, just old, ugly wallpaper, patterned with those delicate little roses that now felt like tiny eyes. And for the first time in days, I let myself breathe. It stayed that way for a few hours. No peeling, no smells, no movement. I ate dinner standing up in the kitchen, keeping the bedroom in my peripheral vision like it might sneak up on me. But nothing happened. Around 9 p.m., I walked past the doorway and froze. There was a shape on the wall, faint but wrong. I flicked on the light. A bulge, right in the center of the wallpapered wall. It was subtle, barely curved at first, the kind of distortion you'd mistake for bad lighting or a paint bubble. But I hadn't painted anything, and it wasn't there an hour ago. I stepped closer, didn't touch it. The paper wasn't loose, it had come unstuck. The wall itself was starting to push outward. It was swelling from the inside, like something didn't like being sealed in. By morning, it wasn't subtle anymore. The bulge in the wall had grown, no longer a ripple or a bump, but a full swelling at the center of the wallpapered section. It bowed out like something pressing against a balloon from the inside. Still, no tears or peeling. The pattern remained pristine, perfectly intact, but the whole thing looked like it was holding its breath. I stood a few feet back, just staring, trying to decide whether to leave it alone or touch it. Part of me wanted to pack a bag and never look back. Another part wanted to finish the job, whatever that meant now. I stepped forward, slowly. The air felt warmer the closer I got. I reached out and pressed a hand against the center of the bulge. It gave under my palm, soft, elastic. It felt wrong, not like anything a wall should feel like. It was like pushing against muscle. I pressed harder, and then it pushed back. Just slightly, enough to let me know it knew I was there. I stumbled backward, breath caught in my throat. Jeez. I didn't think. I grabbed my phone and called the landlord. He picked up, groggy, irritated. What now? There's damage. The wall's swollen. The section I fixed, it's ballooning out like something's behind it. That got his attention. Damage, he repeated. I could hear his posture shift through the phone. How bad? Did you mess with the wall? What did you use? I used adhesive, I said. Construction grade. The wallpaper wouldn't stay down, so I... Oh, he cut in, suddenly chipper. You used the wrong stuff. I could hear the smile behind his voice. Yeah, see, that's on you. If the drywall's compromised, I'd have to replace the whole section, and that ain't cheap, not to mention my nice wallpaper. You told me to fix it. I said to paste it. You used industrial glue. Big difference. That's a liability issue now. I started to argue, but he rolled over me. I'll come by tomorrow, bring a contractor. We'll take a look and get you an estimate for repairs. Click. No goodbye, no concern, just the sound of a trap snapping shut. I lowered the phone and stared at the bloated curve in the wall. The floral wallpaper stretched like skin over a bruise. And for the first time, I realized this wasn't just going to cost me money. I was in something I didn't understand, and I wasn't sure it would let me out. The landlord's truck rumbled into the driveway the next morning, followed by a dented van that looked like it hadn't passed inspection in years. He climbed out first, crisp polo shirt tucked into slacks that didn't fit right, sunglasses perched on top of his head like he thought they made him look important. The man who followed was built like a refrigerator in overalls. He didn't say anything, just gave a short nod before following the landlord up the steps. From the way they greeted each other, the casual laugh, the slap on the shoulder, I could tell this wasn't the first time they'd done this routine. The landlord barely said hello before brushing past me into the bedroom. And there it was, the wall, bowed and taut, the floral patterns stretched thin. He gave a long, exaggerated whistle. Ah, he said, rubbing his chin. Yeah, that'll be a problem. The contractor nodded, already running his hand along the bulge. Might be a moisture pocket, he said. Could be pressure building under it. He turned to me with that fake professional smile. If it bursts, that's an emergency repair. Could run you thousands. The landlord glanced back at me. Lucky for you, I'm being reasonable, he said. Let's just take a look. I clenched my fists at my sides. Watching them together, the two of them smirking, talking in coded contractor language I barely understood, made me want to tear the whole wall down myself. They didn't care about fixing it. They cared about owning me. The landlord stepped closer, pressing a hand flat against the bulge. Ooh, it's soft, he said, grinning. You feel that? That's the adhesive reacting to humidity. The contractor joined him, pressed a finger into the curve. He chuckled low. "Yeah," he said, "could be pressure building under it. Best not to poke it too." He pushed harder. Much. The wall moved. Not the wallpaper, the whole wall. It shifted under their hands like something flexing beneath the surface. The landlord frowned. What the hell? Then it rippled. The bulge pulsed outward once, the floral pattern stretched so tight it almost vanished. A sound followed, a wet, sticky pop like a blister bursting. And then the wall exploded. It happened fast, too fast for my brain to catch up. The wall burst, not the plaster cracking or wallpaper tearing. It ruptured like something inside wanted out. A spray of thick, black liquid splattered across the landlord's chest, soaking through his shirt and spotting his face. He staggered back, coughing, eyes wide in confusion. What the hell? Then, a hand shot out. Not human, not even close. It was slick, the color of wet tar, and shaped almost like a person's, but too long, the fingers tapered into jagged, uneven tips. Not nails, hooks. It slammed into his chest with a wet thud. He screamed, high and sharp, as the thing wrapped around his torso, digging in deep. His shirt tore, then his skin. The claws sank in like meat hooks. And then, without hesitation, it pulled. The contractor lurched forward, grabbing the landlord's arm. Wait! But it was too late. The pull was so fast, I heard the snapping of bones and the ripping of flesh before he even hit the wall. The wall didn't open wider, yet the hand managed to pull the landlord through in one yank, violent and messy. Viscera squirted where excess skin and limbs caught before entry. The landlord's body folded, compressing unnaturally, bones snapping, his limbs twisting inward like wet cardboard. One shoulder slipped in, then his chest, his face, his mouth still open in a soundless scream, all in one motion. And then he was gone. All of him gone, through a space barely large enough for a child to crawl through. His keys hit the floor and clattered, spinning in a red puddle. The contractor stumbled backward, face white, lips moving without sound. I didn't think. I ran. We both did. Down the hall, hoping the daylight would save us somehow. Then, stupidly, I looked back. The bedroom door still hung open. The sunlight reached just far enough inside to light the wall. Where the bulge had been, where the thing had come out. The wallpaper was flat again, perfectly smooth. Just one messy red ring in the pattern, right at chest height. I escaped behind the contractor. I didn't stop until I was halfway to the road, hands shaking, vision swimming, chest heaving. The cops didn't believe us. Not really. They showed up 30 minutes after the 911 call. 2 cruisers, an unmarked sedan, and eventually a detective in a grey button-up who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. They cordoned off the bedroom, walked in and out, took photos, asked the same questions a dozen different ways. And every time, I told them the same story. So did the contractor, which surprised me, honestly. He was pale and rattled, still stuttering when he spoke, but he didn't change a word. The wall just opened. Something grabbed him. He screamed. The wall had just took him. We stood together in the hallway while they searched, listening, watching, waiting for one of them to scream or come running. But no one did. Eventually, the detective called us back in. The bedroom looked normal. No blood, no hole, no black fluid. Just that stupid floral wallpaper. Flat, clean, undisturbed. The only sign that anything had ever happened was the landlord's keyring still lying on the floor where it had fallen. One of the officers picked it up with a gloved hand and bagged it, like that meant something, like it proved something. The detective looked at me for a long time, then the contractor. He had this expression on his face, like he was trying to figure out whether to laugh or have us arrested. "You're sticking to that?" he asked finally. "We're telling you what we saw," I said. He nodded slowly, wrote something in his notebook. "We'll be in touch," he said, voice flat. The investigation would be long. I knew that, but that left me displaced. My life was in that house. God knows it wasn't smart to stay there, but I had no other choice. I spent time looking for somewhere else to stay, but had no luck. In the meantime, I only did what was necessary in the house, changing clothes, washing myself, storing food. But everything else I did in my car. I slept there, ate there, and job searched. The police called a few times, came by once more, but eventually it just stopped. No arrest, no charges, no real investigation, just a note in the file. Unresolved disappearance. That was it. The landlord was gone, and the wall still standing. I moved out the next week. Didn't pack much. Left behind the furniture, some clothes, even the mattress. The landlord's van was still in the driveway when I left. No one had come to claim it. I dropped the keys through the mail slot and didn't look back. They kept the deposit, of course. Some nonsense about property damage. I didn't argue. I just wanted out. I ended up in a house share on the other side of town. 2 roommates, 1 bathroom, kitchen sink that never quite drains right. But it's safe. It's loud and cramped, and no one knows how to take the trash out on time. But the walls don't breathe, and nothing peels itself open in the dark. I sleep. Not great, but I sleep. Some nights I still dream of it. Not the landlord screaming or the blood. Just the feel of it. That soft give under my hand, warm like breath. The wallpaper stretching against my palm, like skin waiting to tear. But then I wake up, and it's gone. And I tell myself I'm lucky. I got out.